Chapter 61. The Second Internal Test. Aunt Lu, I'm full. Chen Qiaoqiao put down the chopsticks in her hand and gave a slight smile to the middle-aged woman on the other side of the dining table. However, when her gaze moved to the two empty places next to the table, her eyes dimmed slightly. I'm going back to my room. After a moment of silence, she said. After speaking, she stood up and headed for the bedroom upstairs. The middle-aged woman across the table hesitated for a moment and reminded. Qiaoqiao, you'll be in 9th grade next year, don't play games for too long. If it affects your grades, Mr. Chen and the others will be angry. Chen Qiaoqiao halted her steps, gave a self-deprecating laugh, and said, Angry? They're too busy making money to bother being angry with me. After speaking, perhaps feeling her attitude wasn't great, she added. Don't worry, Aunt Lu, I got first place in my class last time. I met a big sister in the game from Tsinghua University, she often helps me with my studies in the game and she's really talented. The middle-aged woman frowned in confusion. Can you actually study in the game? Do you really have the time and energy for that? After she finished, she hesitated and continued. You shouldn't spend all day playing games in your room. You can go out and find classmates to hang out with. Your school is a private school, and the students have strong backgrounds. Building good relationships with your classmates now will be beneficial for your future. Did they ask you to tell me that? Chen Qiaoqiao interrupted the middle-aged woman, her voice gradually fading. Qiaoqiao. The middle-aged woman was somewhat helpless, but that counted as tacit agreement. Chen Qiaoqiao gave a self-mocking smile and didn't say anything else. She turned and left, returning to her room, closing the door with a bang. Seeing the tightly closed door, the middle-aged woman sighed and quietly started to clean up the table. Chen Qiaoqiao went to her bedroom, leaned against the door, and gently closed her eyes. Interests, you only care about interests. After speaking, she clenched her fist and punched the door behind her with a smack. That's why I hate reality the most. After a moment of silence, Chen Qiaoqiao raised her head, and her gaze fell on the stealth pod in the corner of her bedroom. The girl's gaze gradually softened. Speaking of which, today is the second closed beta. She murmured to herself. Then the girl stretched out her fair wrist and looked at her watch. About 10 minutes until 12:00. She took a light breath and cleared all the frustration from her mind, slapping her cheeks gently. If I'm not mistaken, this beta seems to have a task to guide new players. The rewards are a bit less, I don't plan to do it, but it might be fun to check out the excitement. Hehe, the expressions of those new players entering the game must be interesting. Seemingly having thought of something, the girl gave a sweet smile, her dimples showing at the corners of her mouth. As she spoke, she quickly changed into her bare pajamas. Then, the girl tied up her hair, secured it with a headband, opened the stealth pod, and lay down inside with practiced ease. Start the game. Elf Kingdom. With her consciousness slightly hazy, she arrived at the familiar character interface. Ding! Game connection successful. New version detected, Elf Kingdom 1.02. Updating version. Ding, update successful. Logging in. Game ID, Little Xian Miao. Chosen 1, welcome back to Elf Kingdom. With the familiar sound from the system, the scene before Chen Qiaoqiao changed abruptly. She appeared in a tastefully decorated wooden bedroom. The bedroom was complete with all kinds of furniture and quite a few exquisite crafts, all of which she had collected as antiques from other players in Felenqui. This was her home in Elf Kingdom. Dazzling light streamed through the window, bringing with it the pure air unique to the elf forest, making the girl feel like all the worries of reality had vanished in an instant. She lazily stretched and sat up from the bed. Unlike on Blue Star, the moment Chen Qiaoqiao came here, she could feel a strong magic power within her, her senses sharpened, her stamina enhanced, and even her perspective seemed elevated. Here, she felt like she had a new life, starting a new chapter. This feeling was something Chen Qiaoqiao found very pleasing. Now, she was no longer Chen Qiaoqiao but Little Xian Miao. She lightly exhaled and glanced at the in-game time on the game system. 8:50 in the morning, just right. She exclaimed as she jumped down from the bed, her chest jiggling with the motion. She took down the exquisite mage robe hanging on the wall and Little Xian Miao skillfully put it on. This was the only black iron lower gold legendary mage robe in the entire server, which she redeemed with a full 10,000 contribution points. Then she pulled out a pair of mage leather boots from under the bed. The boots were also black iron lower gold legendary gale boots, which she snatched up the moment they were listed. With a few swift moves, she slipped them on, feeling quite satisfied. Then, taking the devil's wand from the corner of the room, she struck a pose in front of the long emerald mirror. The feeling was excellent. A full set of gold legendary equipment was unique in the entire server. In particular, she had redeemed the only devil's wand, making Li Mu from the Heart of Nature Guild envious for a long time. Thinking of this, little Xian Miao felt that her pocket money from heaven was well spent. Spending money, isn't it all for happiness? Anyway, it's just monthly allowance. After all, I have plenty of money. Taking a deep breath, little Xian Miao shook her head. She cast aside the chaotic thoughts and walked out through the door. When she arrived at the town, she immediately drew the attention of other players. Isn't that Boss Miao? Good morning. Good morning, President. Good morning, Sister Miao. Rich Sister Miao. Need a sidekick? I'm the kind that can shout 666. Along the way, countless players greeted her warmly, and little Xian Miao smiled back at each of them. Good morning. Good morning. Haha, good morning. Sorry, I've got plenty of sidekicks, don't need another one. Although it was noon on Blue Star, players automatically adjusted to the in-game time upon entering the game. When little Xian Miao arrived at the central square, a crowd of players had already gathered there. They had all accepted the system's new player guide mission and were waiting for the arrival of the second wave of beta players. Unlike their previous arrivals, this time, the new players would be directly transported from the World Tree to the central square. Little Xian Miao checked the system time. It should be about time. Just as she spoke, the bell from the natural temple began to echo softly. Dong dong dong. With the melodious bell, countless golden arrays suddenly appeared on the square. Numerous spatial ripples spread, magic power surged in the square, and one tall figure after another emerged from the arrays, appearing in the player's sight. They were new elves. They stood densely together, dressed in the linen robes and wooden armor that little Xian Miao found so nostalgic. Looking at those curious faces, observing those expressions gradually turning from excitement to shock and elation, little Xian Miao's lips curved slightly upward. She bent her large eyes into a sweet, happy smile, whispering to herself. Welcome to the world of swords and magic. Chapter 62. Haha, I finally became a beta test player. Woo, what refreshing air. Such a beautiful forest. The realism of this game. I already don't know how to express it. We've crossed over, we must have crossed over, this is definitely a conspiracy by aliens. Is this the town built by the first test players? So beautiful. In the plaza, hundreds of second test players curiously and excitedly examined this unfamiliar world. And greeting them, in addition to the breathtaking forest landscape, the uniquely styled elf town, and the fresh, pure air, were also 300 enthusiastic faces. Ha ha ha. Welcome, newcomers, to the big family of Elf Kingdom. Dima laughed loudly, skillfully squeezed into the crowd, and put his arms around the shoulders of two slightly shy newbie girls. Are you excited? Are you thrilled? Are you wondering how to quickly blend into this game? As he spoke, Dima skillfully brandished his purple epic black iron level curved blade and said proudly. He he he. Come, let the number 1 tank warrior in the server teach you how to get started. As soon as he finished, he was kicked in the rear, landing face first on the ground. Move aside, these two are my friends in real life, don't randomly chat them up. The one called Gugu Bird walked over with a stern face. Dima got up from the ground and, seeing who it was, shrank his head and gave an embarrassed smile. Cough cough. So, they're Gugu Big Sister's friends, sorry. I'll go find other newbies interested in the warrior class, haha, I'm taking off. After speaking, he dashed away. Pfft. Watching Dima's retreating figure, little Xian Miao laughed. Dima, this guy, could definitely be considered a unique character throughout the server. He really had a kind heart, but why was his emotional intelligence so low? Little Xian Miao shook her head. She glanced at Gugu Bird, who was actively chatting with her new game friends, hesitated for a moment, and decided not to interrupt. Meanwhile, the first test players who had received the guiding task were also finding their targets and starting to guide the newbies through missions. This was a task from the goddess, and whenever players guided a newbie onto the right track, they would receive a substantial contribution reward. The task was simple, just complete a daily mission with the newbies, and for each person guided, the reward was 100 contribution points. And in order to exchange for those eye-popping epic equipment in the system, as well as learn various cultivation techniques and skills, the 900-second test players had turned into walking contribution points in the eyes of the first test players. Every first test player was scrambling to take people under their wing, with some even grabbing 4 or 5 at once. The enthusiasm had almost scared the newcomers entering the game. Little Xian Miao had no intention of guiding newbies. In fact, she just wanted to join the excitement and see the surprised looks on the newcomers' faces. She loved the gaming atmosphere in Elf Kingdom. Although players here would also argue over interests and have their conflicts, overall they were very united and genuinely treated their companions. Even those who approached her trying to latch onto her rich status behaved very genuinely. This was much better than those hypocritical people in real life who hid behind smiling masks. However, even though little Xian Miao didn't plan on guiding the newcomers, some things were beyond one's control. In fact, when she appeared in the eyes of the second test players, she had already become the focal point. The reason was her weapon, refurbished by Eve, which, regardless of its effectiveness in combat, certainly had an impressive display effect. The luxurious appearance of the black iron level golden legendary equipment was so stunning that even Alice thought it was a divine artifact when she saw it. And little Xian Miao, dressed in a full set of golden legendary equipment, undoubtedly appeared as a top player to the other players. Coupled with the fact that she was a girl. Soon, she was surrounded by a group of second test players. Little Xian Miao. Are you the little Xian Miao from the forum? Newbie seeking guidance. Miao, can you be my mentor? Master. New player seeking to add as a friend. For a moment, the surrounded girl felt overwhelmed. Sorry, I don't plan on guiding anyone for now. In the end, she had to apologize and politely refuse. The rejected newbie players were disappointed. But soon, they were spotted by other seasoned first test players and were pulled away. Gradually, the space around little Xian Miao emptied out. She didn't mind at all, and instead found a corner of the plaza to sit down, watching the bustling players in the town with a smile. Excited newcomers. Enthusiastic veteran players. And the busy natural saintess Alice. What a lively scene! Compared to the real world, the people here seemed more energetic and more genuine. Little Xian Miao really liked this feeling. Her eyes scanned the crowd, enjoying the feeling of lounging around. Suddenly, a figure caught her eye. It was a strange female newbie player. Unlike the other excited players, she appeared very calm. She wasn't in a hurry to do quests, nor was she interacting with veteran players, but quietly standing by the steel in the center of the plaza. She reached out her hand, slowly stroking the steel, pondering something unknown. And with just one glance, little Xian Miao found herself unable to look away. It wasn't that this player's character design was particularly attractive. In fact, the players in Elf Kingdom all had top-tier appearances. And this player's design was nothing if not ordinary. Her hair was the most common shade of blonde, her eyes were the most common emerald green, and even her hairstyle was the most common shoulder-length style. Her figure was average, her height was average, everything about her was the system's basic settings. In terms of appearance alone, this player was no different from the others. But, her aura was different. Aura is a peculiar thing. Although everyone had similar levels of attractiveness, people with aura and those without stood out when standing together. Take Dima, for instance, even though he had a handsome face, whenever he smiled, it gave off a sleazy vibe. But this female player was different. She just stood there, yet seemed out of place with her surroundings, emanating a vibe of keeping strangers at bay. She seemed so ordinary, yet gave off a noble, elegant and aloof vibe, as if the next second she might leave this world. Her lips had a faint, elusive smile. A smile that came from the heart but seemed to carry some inexplicable quality. Contentment, nostalgia? Little Xian Miao's mind suddenly conjured these words, without knowing why. Gradually, a bit of curiosity arose in her heart. Little Xian Miao glanced at the ID above the other player's head. It had only one character. Wind. She raised her eyebrows. Wind, hey? Wind, rootless and drifting, shapeless and indistinct. Wind, born of the heart, moved by the heart. With a budding interest, little Xian Miao stood up. She tidied her outfit and walked toward the other player. Chapter 63. These are the names of all the players who built the elf town. Behind the new player named Wind, little Xian Miao took a deep breath and introduced herself with a voice she thought was the friendliest. Hearing the voice from behind, the female elf with the ID Wind paused slightly in her actions. She slowly turned around and looked back. A pair of emerald green eyes gazed at little Xian Miao. Her gaze was very pure and very calm, not at all like a player who had just entered the game. And the faint glimmer in her eyes added a touch of noble grace. Little Xian Miao had seen that kind of gaze in reality. Only those who have been in high positions for years have such confident and bright eyes. The elegance and nobility that unconsciously radiated from her demeanor further convinced little Xian Miao. She must have a significant status and position in real life. For a moment, little Xian Miao even felt a bit uneasy. Seeing little Xian Miao's discomfort, Wind smiled slightly. "Thank you." Her voice was melodious and had a unique clear and pleasant tone that made one feel close. This contrasted sharply with the aloof aura she exuded, yet somehow without any discordance. And her smile was warm and natural, with a sense of being bathed in the spring breeze. Is this true nobility? Little Xian Miao couldn't help but think. She hesitated for a moment, and almost involuntarily blurted out. Are you unfamiliar with this world? Do you need me to help you with the game tasks?" Unconsciously, she had added an honorific. Hearing her words, a hint of surprise flashed across Wind's emerald pupils. She smiled slightly, and it seemed as if the whole world welcomed spring. "All right." For a moment, little Xian Miao felt her heart melt, and a small sense of joy arose within. But soon, she felt something was off. "Hey? Why do I feel as if I've been acknowledged by an elder?" On the streets of Elf Town, little Xian Miao and Wind walked side by side. The leader of one of the three major guilds in Elf Kingdom felt as if she were undergoing a leader's inspection. All along the way, she proudly and somewhat shyly introduced the variously styled buildings on both sides. "This is Elf Town, which we players built together during the first test. Of course, the main force in building the town was our guild's construction team, and other players simply provided the materials. Providing materials is a task for new players. Actually, the initial task for new players was to build the town, but considering that they lacked experience and that our guild's construction team had already matured, we only let new players provide the materials. In the future, the new houses will belong to the new players, and if they want, they can spend contribution points to commission our guild's construction team to customize their houses. As long as they have enough contribution points, they could even design it into a castle. Customized housing with contribution points." Hearing this, Wind expressed surprise for the first time. It seemed this matter was somewhat unexpected to her. After speaking, her expression turned a bit inexplicable while her words carried a hint of admiration. "Your guild has real talent." Upon hearing the praise, little Xian Miao's eyes curved into crescents with joy. She patted her heavy chest proudly. "Of course. Our guild has many talented people. Civil engineers, landscape architects, you name it. Those gardens and the European-style and Chinese-style classical buildings were all designed and built by our guild's top designers. They have their construction teams in Minecraft too. By the way, would you like to join our guild, the Meng Meng Committee? Our guild focuses on lifestyle, and it's very cozy." As little Xian Miao introduced, she turned back and looked at Wind with bright, sparkling eyes. But Wind just smiled and gave no definitive reply. Seeing the lack of a clear response, little Xian Miao felt inexplicably disappointed. However, she quickly adjusted her mood and smiled sweetly. Well, it's too early anyway, players need to be at least level 5 to join a guild. So, would you like to accept a novice task?" Little Xian Miao asked again. "A novice task?" Wind raised an eyebrow. "Well, if you're interested, we can head to the natural temple to find Alice. Alice is the natural saintess in the game, a very gentle NPC. Oh, and NPCs in this game are really lifelike. We can completely interact with them as if they were real people." Little Xian Miao continued to explain. "Alice." Upon hearing this name, Wind's lips curled into a subtle smile. She gently shook her head and said, "Never mind, I wish to wander around." Upon hearing Wind's words, little Xian Miao suddenly came to a realization. "Are you a scenery enthusiast?" "Scenery enthusiast?" Wind paused slightly, her voice tinged with oddness. Little Xian Miao hurriedly explained. "Ahem, that's a gaming term for players who don't focus on fighting and leveling up, but rather enjoy taking screenshots of the scenery. Listening to her words, Win's lips curved slightly upward. I know. After speaking, she turned and approached a shop in the town selling various berries, her voice a bit ethereal. I don't have much time online, so, yes, I'm a scenery enthusiast. What do you mean by yes? Little Xian Miao muttered curiously. Not much time online. In that moment, little Xian Miao's speculation about Win's real-life identity deepened. Only those at the top might not have that much time to spend in games, right? She must be very busy in real life. The game must merely be a source of relaxation and enjoyment for her. She likely holds a senior, prestigious position in reality, admired and respected, managing many subordinates. Perhaps she's part of a large company or the government. Could she be someone curious about this magical game? With that thought, little Xian Miao felt she could become a detective. And when she saw Win's position, especially her bright eyes as she gazed at the berries, her eyes lit up again. She picked up a berry, introducing it enthusiastically. Don't these berries look delicious? Actually, they taste great too. I think they're even better than the fruits on Blue Star. I wonder how the designers came up with this. Oh, and in this game, we also need to eat, and berries are a great choice. These shops are player-owned, and the berries are gathered from the forest. You can buy them using contribution points. Contribution points are like the currency in this game, and you can start using them at level 11. Until then, new players have to forage for berries in the forest themselves. But the elf forest is rich in resources, so berries are easy to find. Of course, doing tasks for Alice can also get you food. As she spoke, little Xian Miao shouted into the shop. Is anyone there? Is anyone there? No one responded. Little Xian Miao slapped her own forehead. Oh, I forgot, everyone's busy guiding newcomers now. After speaking, she directly grabbed 2 purple berries from the fruit basket, handing one to Wind. Here, it's for you, give it a try. I know the player who owns this shop, he's from our guild. He left tracking magic on the goods, so I'll just pay him back later. Wind took the berry with surprise and gently bit into it. The fragrant juice overflowed. Her eyes instantly became even brighter. Her expression seemed as if she hadn't tasted anything so delicious in a long time. How is it? Tastes good, right? Seeing her expression, little Xian Miao said happily. Yes. Wind nodded. She chewed very slowly, savoring the process. It's delicious, she said. Chapter 64. Wind was a very peculiar player. That's what little Xian Miao thought. At first, she assumed Wind might be one of those players who savor the scenery for leisure and entertainment. But soon, Wind's actions made her overturn her previous assumption. Wind neither excitedly looked for beautiful vistas to capture memories with nor asked her where the most magnificent sceneries could be found. This left little Xian Miao, as a semi-lifestyle player, full of great ideas but without a way to express them. However, Wind seemed to have a special fondness for the world's cuisine. Along the way, whenever she saw food she was curious about, she would stop and taste it. Like a traveler who hadn't savored delicious food in a long time. Besides, she seemed to be quite familiar with this world, though little Xian Miao couldn't quite explain why, but she had this feeling. Maybe, it was Wind's carefree state while playing? No restraints, and no excitement of entering a new realm, but like walking in her own backyard. I must be overthinking it. Little Xian Miao shook her head. However, in turn, she became even more curious about Wind. This peculiar player was very gentle, always with a faint smile, especially when she saw players excitedly doing tasks. Her smile seemed to soften even more. Moreover, she loved to move around. Little Xian Miao accompanied her for a long time as she wandered endlessly. It seemed, she truly enjoyed this kind of stroll. Do you really enjoy this feeling of strolling? Finally, little Xian Miao couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. Hearing little Xian Miao's question, Wind turned around, her emerald starry eyes flashing with a deep glow. She placed a small red berry into her mouth, her voice ethereal. I like this feeling of freedom. Freedom. Little Xian Miao felt a touch of emotion in her heart, and somehow, she suddenly thought of her real-life self. Vaguely, she also felt a sense of resonance. But at this moment, in her heart, Wind seemed even more mysterious. She is just like just like a princess who has run away from a castle. Somehow, little Xian Miao had such a thought. She felt she must have read too many fairy tales. However, once this idea emerged, she felt the other really matched such a role. Even though she was using the most basic system character, that couldn't hide Wind's mysteriousness and nobility. Although she was close at hand, Wind gave the impression that she might leave at any moment, returning to her own place. She seemed never to belong here. Nor did she seem to plan to really integrate into this place. Her world, her future, didn't seem to be here. She was like a lonely wanderer, merely stopping to rest for a while. Soon, she would set off again. She must be lonely, right? The thought made little Xian Miao hesitate for a moment before inviting. Well, tonight, we will hold a big bonfire party to welcome new players in the square. Would you like to join us? Hearing little Xian Miao's words, Wind was slightly taken aback. Soon, a bright light flashed in her eyes, and she gently nodded. All right. The night fell quickly. Under the guidance of the first test players, the players of the second closed beta gradually familiarized themselves with the gameplay of Elf Kingdom. While highly praising this game for living up to its reputation, they accepted the old players' invitations to the gathering. Somehow, the bonfire party had become a regular celebration in Elf Kingdom. A pile of wood, 4 meters high, had been set up in the middle of the square, igniting amidst cheers and whistles. The fiercely burning flames, 7 or 8 meters high, illuminated the entire square brightly. The first test players set up a long feast in the square, with ingredients including various berries from the elf forest, along with some unnamed tasty nuts and delicious roasted meat obtained after hunting demon beasts. Of course, the latter was placed somewhat discreetly to avoid being seen by Alice and Berserker, who would inevitably scold them again. Additionally, some players procured honey from the forest and brewed it into a honey tea with a plant similar to Earth's chrysanthemum, serving as the drink. Players gathered in small groups, with arms around each other's shoulders. Some players specially set up tabletop games, gathered around by a group, playing joyfully and laughing. Other beta players explored the PK system in the square, consuming contribution value for dueling, with spectacular magic and sword skills attracting a crowd of players to watch and cheer. The wantonness and strength had the eyes of new second test players gleaming. There was also a player expert who specifically crafted a homemade guitar from wood and demon beast fur, playing and singing, prompting a chorus of whistles and applause from the players. The entire square was immersed in a festival-like atmosphere. Little Xian Miao and Wind sat on a square mat woven from vines, savoring the wild field delicacies of the feast while enjoying the grand scene on the square. Wind's expression was very gentle. Her gaze, under the reflection of the firelight, glimmered like stars, similar to the rippling surface of a lake under the sunlight. Watching her focused expression, little Xian Miao's mouth gradually curved upwards. This game has a high degree of freedom, so, almost anything we want to accomplish can be done. We've held such bonfire parties many times since the game's launch. Saying that, little Xian Miao stretched lazily, drank a sip of sweet honey tea, and smiled. Speaking of which, it's quite interesting. Logically, many of us don't really like socializing in reality, but we've fallen in love with bonfire revelry in the game. Wind didn't speak but sat beside her, eating fruit and quietly listening to her soliloquy. Many of my members have told me they are actually quite introverted in real life. Little Xian Miao spoke with a gradually dazed expression. However, it's different here. Looking at the happy faces one by one, her expression gradually softened too. When they first told me, I was quite surprised. Because, in my eyes, everyone seemed quite outgoing and enthusiastic. I really couldn't imagine many people were gloomy and introverted in real life. Someone once told me before, saying many people don't like socializing, which isn't truly due to introversion, but rather because they've seen through the shrewdness and hypocrisy in real life, despising those superficial and pointless interactions. Instead of faking niceness, they prefer staying in their own genuine little world. However, this doesn't mean they genuinely dislike interacting with others, they just haven't met someone they truly connect with. People on different wavelengths can't communicate on the same level. People on the same wavelength will eventually meet, no matter how many mountains and rivers separate them, whereas people with mismatched frequencies, even if spending every day together, will always veer down separate paths. Before, I didn't know the meaning of these words nor did I resonate with them. But after entering this game, I think I finally understand the meaning of these words. With that, little Xian Miao finished her cup of honey tea, her mouth curving into a sweet smile. Here, everyone has found a home, there's no need to hide their true selves or conceal their thoughts. It's as if everyone has begun a new, unrestrained life journey. Perhaps, that's the charm of this game. A moment later, little Xian Miao sighed. This game, indeed possesses a unique magic. Sometimes, I really wish this wasn't a game, but a real world. I genuinely want to thank the people who developed this game. Thank you, for painting us another beautiful life. Boom! Boom! The loud bangs interrupted little Xian Miao's soliloquy. The two instinctively looked up towards the sky. There, one after another, the fireworks forged by magic appeared and blossomed. Colorful and very beautiful. The magic's brilliance reflected in little Xian Miao's pupils, shining brightly. Just like her current mood. Wind turned her head, her gaze resting on little Xian Miao's profile, her lips curling into a smile. You really like this game? Little Xian Miao nodded vigorously while watching the magical fireworks, her voice firm and unwavering. Of course. Glad to hear that. Wind chuckled, then gently stood up. Seeing Wind suddenly stand up, little Xian Miao was slightly taken aback. Where are you going? It's getting late, I should be heading back. Wind said. Chapter 65. After hearing Wind's words, little Xian Miao raised an eyebrow and glanced at the system time, exclaiming in surprise. Ah! Oh dear, it's indeed late, it's already been 5 hours on Blue Star. Are you logging off? Wind paused briefly, then nodded. Little Xian Miao rubbed her chin and said. If you're logging off, you should head to the morgue first. Your body will remain in place when you log off from the game, so it's best to log off from a safe place. Morgue. For the first time, Wind's expression showed clear astonishment and confusion. Aha, that's our nickname for the logout point. Little Xian Miao chuckled a bit awkwardly and explained. It's like this, we have a centralized logout point in the town, where players without a home can log off. It's protected by arrays carved by Alice, so it's very safe after logging off. Well, this game is fully immersive, so your body doesn't disappear after logging off but just loses control, lying there like a corpse. When they're lined up in a room, it can be a bit creepy, so we call it the morgue. Wind. Of course, if you don't mind, you could log off at my place too. My bed is pretty big. Little Xian Miao added. She had a good impression of this calm new player and vaguely felt the urge to befriend her. However, Wind didn't agree immediately. She just smiled and gently shook her head. No worries, I've already troubled you a lot today, no need to trouble you anymore. Although it was a polite refusal, the warm words and gentle smile didn't make anyone feel the least bit uncomfortable. Oh, I see. Little Xian Miao regretfully pinched the edge of her clothes. Wind took a long look at her, smiling. Thank you for keeping me company today, I had a great time. The berries were delicious, and the bonfire party was really fun. Let's meet again if there's a chance, I have to go now. After speaking, she nodded slightly at little Xian Miao and turned to walk into the crowd. Hey! I haven't told you where the morgue is. Little Xian Miao shouted from behind, hurrying to catch up. However, Wind's figure was already gone in the crowd. Where did she go? Little Xian Miao paused, looking around in search. Yet she could no longer find a trace of Wind. She tapped her forehead in frustration. Oh dear! After chatting all day, I totally forgot to add her as a friend, I'm such a fool. In the elf forest, a graceful figure was slowly strolling. It was Wind. With each of her steps, the plants on either side of the forest seemed to pay homage to their queen, moving aside autonomously to reveal a path. The leaves rustled, and fireflies danced around her as if saluting a supreme being. With every step, a faint radiance emanated from her, making her appear mysterious and holy in the darkness. Her hair gradually lengthened, and its original golden hue transformed into a magnificent silver. Her height increased, and her figure became taller and more elegant. Her emerald eyes faded from green, turning into a mysterious and noble violet. Her features became more refined, more unparalleled. Even her original novice outfit transformed into a wholly divine dress, condensed from divine power. It was as if in an instant, she had transformed from a princess fallen to earth back into a goddess of the heavens. No. She was the goddess. If any players were present, they would have certainly noticed that she looked exactly like the statue enshrined in the natural temple. The Mother Nature, life goddess, elf sovereign Eve Yggdrasil. Yes, wind was a manifestation created by Eve for herself. And the core used was Hela's soul storage orb. Her power was also gradually rising, a hint of majesty beginning to emanate outward. Until, it reached a pinnacle. Barely gold, hey. Feeling the power within her, she let out a sigh. The soul storage orb isn't fully restored yet, I can only exert this much power for now. Still, being able to enjoy the long-lost freedom of movement is enough. It's been so long since I last ate anything, I didn't expect the food in the elf forest to be so tasty. After saying this, a sudden thought flickered in her mind. Streams of deathly aura steadily spread from her. The silver hair that reached her waist was tinged with a deep hue, turning from bright silver to dark silver. Her purple eyes turned crimson. Even her appearance changed slightly at her direction, becoming a little less perfect and more subtle. Her pointy ears transformed into a human-like shape. Additionally, her formerly splendid divine dress morphed once again into a somewhat somber black dress armor, an altered elf outfit that Eve had obtained from the players. Sensing her new state, she smiled slightly. Activating the divine power of the soul storage orb lets me wear the title of Death God's Favored. It's like having two identities all at once. I truly am a genius. She turned her head back, gazing once more in the direction of Elf Town. There, the lights flickered faintly, with the players' laughter still faintly audible. A faint smile spread across her face. Though I opened this game for myself, seeing them so happy also somewhat affects me. In the future, I should be a little kinder to them. Maybe add 50, 10 contribution points to each task. Any more, and it might lead to inflation. But gradually, the smile on her face faded into a hint of gloom. Is it the influence of merging with the world tree? I feel like I can never regain that state. She reached out, rubbing her forehead. She initially thought that wearing a new identity would naturally integrate her into the players' circle. After all, she inherently belonged to them. However, reality proved that now as a true god, she seemed unable to reclaim that feeling. Her personality, her aura, seemed to have been influenced by something. Even with a change of identity, she couldn't suppress her unique presence. Rather than a human, she increasingly resembled a true god standing high above. She sighed, unsure whether this was good or bad. Of course, Eve speculated that it might also be because she hadn't fully mastered the power of a true god. But regardless, having gained the legacy of the World Tree and also inheriting the World Tree's enemy, she knew that this world wasn't as idyllic as the players imagined. As she gradually summoned players and examined the elven historical records they retrieved, she also became more aware of her distinctiveness. As a true god, the authority that the World Tree possessed seemed more overwhelming than she had anticipated. And the secret of the divine war of the millennium was far deeper than she had imagined. She still had a long road ahead, a road full of perils, filled with uncertainties, yet also leading to infinite possibilities. This was destined to be a lonely path. This was also predestined to be a path of the strong. However, on her journey toward the highest divine throne, she still hoped in her heart to retain a bit of human likeness. In the future, if there's time, perhaps I should play like this again. Eve believed. Perhaps the arrival of the players could allow her to maintain that sliver of humanity on her path as a true god. And not completely transform into a deity who sees all things as ants, aloof and detached. Yes, it was definitely not because she was inherently poor at interacting with others. After a day of playing, it's time to return. Sighing softly, divine brilliance blossomed from her, and her figure slowly faded away. Chapter 66. This was a ruin buried with vines and wild grass. A few goblins were gathered around a bonfire, roasting a plump mountain rabbit. Suddenly, a shadow enveloped them. Before the goblins could react, a thick, large hand lifted the leader who was roasting the rabbit like picking up a chick. The remaining goblins turned their heads and were scared out of their wits, hurriedly turning around to kneel on the ground, trembling. In front of them stood a ferocious team of half-beasts, led by none other than Black Iron Upper Peak's Blackstone. Blackstone looked at the trembling goblin he had lifted, a hint of disgust flashing in his eyes. He casually threw it to the ground and said, "Where's your leader?" The goblin fell to the ground but didn't get angry. It quickly scrambled up, grinning fawningly at Blackstone while pointing in a direction, making ah-ah-ah gestures. Seeing its ridiculous expression, Blackstone snorted coldly and casually took the rabbit meat from the bonfire, taking a bite. However, he soon frowned, spitting out the rabbit meat as if dissatisfied with the goblin's culinary skills. Seeing his actions, the goblin was filled with dread, kowtowing and choking with anxiety. Blackstone said nothing more and kicked the goblin. "Lead the way." His voice brooked no refusal. Under the goblin's lead, the half-beasts arrived at a collapsed building in the ruins. The goblins walked a few steps ahead, swiftly uncovering a patch of straw to reveal a large hole on the side of the building. They then skillfully crawled inside. The half-beasts also bent down and followed the goblins into the building. Inside were collapsed ruins and discarded trash, emitting an unpleasant odor, while a winding path was left in the middle. Led by the goblins, the half-beasts continued deeper inside. As they walked further, the view gradually broadened, and eventually, they found themselves in a spacious cave after a series of turns. This was a hidden base of the Rock Cave tribe in the Elf Forest, also a transit point for hunting elves. In the center of the cave, a bonfire was burning, around which 3 half-beasts were lazily lying, sleeping soundly. A few goblins were beside them, using large leaves to fan them continuously. Aside from them, deeper in the cave was a man-made stone prison. Through the iron bars, a few pairs of eyes filled with fear and despair could be vaguely seen inside. Blackstone first glanced at the stone prison, looking surprised, then turned his gaze to the 3 half-beasts. Seeing the half-beasts sleeping soundly, his already fierce face looked even uglier. He snorted coldly and walked straight over, giving each one a kick. "Which bastard dares to disturb your half-beast grandpa's sweet dreams?" The 3 half-beasts awoke with a start, cursing and drawing their weapons in anger. However, when they saw who it was, their faces changed immediately, shrinking back fearfully. Lord Blackstone, why have you come to the base?" They laughed awkwardly, hurriedly hiding their wolf-fang clubs and broadswords behind them, fawning as they spoke. "Humph, 3 useless fools with not a hint of vigilance." Blackstone cursed in frustration, then said in a deep voice. "Lord Jushin sent me to investigate some matters. I have questions for you." The 3 half-beasts exchanged glances, their expressions gradually becoming serious. "You are here to investigate the disappearance of the half-beast hunting team." Blackstone gave them a look, nodding. "That is one of my purposes, but first, I need to ask you, has there been any unusual activity in the Elf Forest recently? Especially, near the Felenqui ruins?" Upon hearing Blackstone's words, the 3 half-beasts were slightly stunned. They looked at each other, then shook their heads. It seems, there's nothing particularly unusual." Blackstone's expression darkened. "You better think again. Don't tell me you've been sleeping in the cave this whole time." As he spoke, the pressure of his black iron upper rank began to emanate, suffocating the 3 black iron lower half-beasts. Under the pressure of a higher rank, the 3 nearly fell to their knees simultaneously, their faces changing dramatically as large beads of sweat dripped down. Suddenly, one of the half-beasts raised his head, shivering as he shouted. "Lord Blackstone, I remember something unusual recently." Hearing his words, Blackstone gradually withdrew his intimidation. "Speak." The half-beast kneeling on the ground gasped in relief, then said shakily. "Recently, there have been more low-level demon beasts nearby, and many of them used to only appear on the Felenqui side. It seems they are migrating collectively." Demon beasts migrating? Blackstone's eyes glinted sharply. In the Elf Forest, the territorial awareness of demon beasts was quite strong. Under normal circumstances, such migration did not occur. And when migration did happen, there were generally 2 situations. One was that they found a better living area and actively relocated. And the other was that they sensed some threat, being forced to migrate. The Elf Forest was rich in resources, practically a paradise for demon beasts, so the first situation was rare. Not to mention that the surrounding area of the Rock Cave tribe's base was already barren. So the first scenario could be quickly eliminated. Then, the result was self-evident. They are avoiding something. Something is triggering their sense of threat, forcing them to migrate collectively. And the source is likely in Felenqui. Blackstone's eyes flashed. If he guessed correctly, this was probably the key to what the giant mountain priest wanted him to investigate. Thinking it over, he asked again. "Are there any strong demon beasts among them?" The half-beast who answered shook his head. No, they're all very weak demon beasts, the highest barely reaching the initial black iron lower level, so we didn't pay much attention before." "Weak demon beasts?" Blackstone's eyes flashed again. This indicated that the threat wasn't very strong, at least the high-level demon beasts didn't sense any danger. For a moment, Blackstone recalled the peculiar elf mentioned in the oracle by the giant mountain priest before his departure. The elf battling goblins. He mulled over the thought. Could it be, that this was the strange elves, mentioned by Lord Jushin, causing trouble? And the death gods favored mentioned by the priest? Right. Right. I remembered two more things. During Blackstone's contemplation, another half-beast raised his hand. Blackstone looked at him. Speak. The half-beast took a deep breath and said. About a month ago, dozens of goblins fled into the base, but most of them seemed to have been frightened by something, their spirits extremely unstable. Additionally, the last destination of Lord Rock was the core region of the Elf Forest, where Felinqui is located. At these words, Blackstone's face darkened. Why didn't you say this sooner? The half-beast quivered slightly, cautiously saying. Well, goblins are always timid, and we couldn't understand their shrieks, so we didn't pay attention. As for Lord Rock, I was nervous just now, and forgot. Humph, useless. Blackstone cursed. He didn't look at the three half-beasts again but instead silently pieced together the information he gathered in his mind. Vaguely, he formed a certain guess. A group of low-level elves has returned to the elf forest. They seem to have been blessed by the death god, driving out the goblins of Felinqui and the nearby demon beasts, likely plotting something in Felinqui. There's a high possibility that the death god's favored is involved, and Rock's half-beast hunting team's disappearance is likely due to discovering their secret. The death god's favored's power should be quite strong. Otherwise, Rock and his team wouldn't have encountered mishaps. Even with the holy artifact given by the priest, I might not be able to counter it. Rashly entering Felinqui could be very dangerous. It seems that group with long ears isn't as loyal as the legends say, being involved with the death god. A hint of ridicule flashed across Blackstone's face. With a glint in his eyes, he asked again. Are demon beasts still fleeing from the area? Yes, yes. The responding half-beast said tremblingly. Blackstone fell into contemplation once more. Demon beasts were still being driven away, indicating those elves should still be active around Felinqui. It meant, he should have a chance to capture someone around Felinqui. This should be a relatively safe approach. Thinking this, Blackstone issued a command. Summon a group of goblins and come with me to investigate the situation around Felinqui. Chapter 67. Elf Forest, Southeastern Core Area. A group of strangely dressed elves were shuttling through the forest, exploring. Most of them wore simple hemp robes and wooden armor, with only the first three dressed in luxurious battle attire. The leader was fully armed. He sported a rare red afro, wielded a delicate scimitar, and wore heavy armor that didn't quite match his elven companions, looking rather smug. It was Dimasha. As he moved forward, he talked to his teammates behind him, whose eyes were shining. Ha, newcomers, we're out of the safe zone now, and you guys will gradually encounter the legendary demon beasts. The battle mechanics in this world are very realistic and hard to master. So if you don't want to die, make sure to coordinate with your teammates during battles, don't go solo. Although dying means you can resurrect, without perfect resurrection attempts, you'll drop back to level 1. But don't worry. The three of us will back you up. After days of grinding tasks and training, Dimasha had reached level 14. As the highest ranking tank of the Heart of Nature, he decisively took on the responsibility of training newcomers, deciding to take some of the more battle-interested guild members to explore outside. He had originally planned to wait for the team members to earn a few more perfect resurrections before seeking adventure, but unfortunately, there hadn't been many tasks rewarding perfect resurrections recently. With Li Mu, who was busy studying the array, unable to resist some new guild members' curiosity about combat, he ultimately let Dimasha take them for a relatively safe outdoor adventure. As soon as Dimasha finished speaking, the team members started to voice their questions. But, Big Brother Dimasha, we haven't seen any animals along the way. Yet. Isn't it supposed to be dangerous out here? We must have walked over 10 kilometers by now, and it's getting dark. Hearing his teammates, Dimasha scratched his head awkwardly and said. Don't panic. Don't panic. There are no monsters in the safe zone, ahem, it's because we ate them all, but there must be some outside. Teammate. Indeed, eaten them all. These days, the safe zone centered around the world tree was almost devoid of the presence of demon beasts. Being Tian Chao people, the players fully exhibited their national traits, and almost all the small animals that looked edible ended up in their stomachs. Those lucky enough to escape had fled to other areas. Without the wild game, some beta players were even starting to consider starting a farming industry. With no demon beasts to practice on, Demacia had to take the newcomers outside the safe zone. Fortunately, after initial explorations, players had discovered that the southeastern direction of the elf forest appeared to have relatively barren land, with weaker demon beasts residing there. So coming here, Demacia was somewhat confident in ensuring the new members' safety. "Hang in there a bit more, folks, we'll definitely encounter demon beasts," he said to his teammates. After saying this, he chuckled, "But be careful, demon beasts spawn randomly in the wild, and with good luck, you'll face low-ranked ones. With bad luck, facing black iron middle rank or even higher isn't impossible. But, since we're in this barren place, we probably won't encounter them. If we do run into something we can't handle, if you don't want to start from zero, just run away." After hearing Demacia's words, several newly joined players exchanged glances and nodded. As they continued walking, suddenly, the lead player, who was a hunter from the first beta, stopped. "There's movement," he said with a solemn expression, gesturing for silence. Demacia and the others perked up and quickly quieted down. The hunter then took a deep breath, carefully observing the surrounding shrubs, listening, and slowly moving forward while crouching. Everyone held their breath. The hunter quietly detached from the group, sneaking over to a nearby bush and gently pushing it aside. Soon, his expression turned from surprise to excitement. He turned around and mouthed to the group, "Goblins! Goblins!" Matching his lip movements, Demacia and the others mentally vocalized, "Wait! Goblins!" His eyes lit up. It had been a long time since they last saw these adorable creatures after the goblins at the Felenqui ruins were wiped out. And if he remembered correctly, these little bundles of experience and contribution usually dwelled in caves and ruins. But there weren't any caves in the elf forest. Could it be, there's a ruin nearby? In an instant, Demacia's breathing became heavy. Ruins. It's very possible there are ruins nearby. Come to think of it, most players hadn't ventured deep in this direction because of the barren land, so there might actually be elf ruins. Could it be? Demacia was about to trigger another storyline event. Thinking of this, he perked up and quickly waved his teammates over, whispering, "We've got something good. No noise, move quietly." Hearing this, the group became excited. Demacia then quietly moved next to the hunter player and looked into the distance. In a clearing not far away, several goblins were gathered, doing something unknown. Demacia's eyes sparkled. He whispered to his teammates who caught up, "I'll count to 3. I'll charge first, and you flank them from both sides. Don't let them all escape." After saying this, he thought for a moment and changed his mind, "No, move slowly and let a couple escape, so we can follow them to find their lair." Then he began counting. 1, 2, 3. With that, he took a deep breath, grabbed his scimitar, and leaped out of the bushes. "Sun thief! I've missed you guys!" he shouted excitedly, charging toward the goblins. The goblins seemed startled by the sudden attack. They yelped and scrambled to grab their weapons. However, Demacia's strength had grown tremendously, and with a single sweep, he felled 2 goblins, causing the others to flee in panic. At this point, the other teammates arrived. Demacia shouted, "Flank them!" After saying that, he took the lead and chased the fleeing goblins. Strangely, the goblins, instead of scattering, seemed to agree on a direction to escape. Seeing this, Demacia became even more excited. Ruins! They must be escaping back to the ruins. With this thought, he pursued them more eagerly, filled with excitement. As the chase continued, the surrounding forest became denser. Goblins didn't have the stamina of the elves, and soon Demacia caught up with them one by one, striking them down, leaving the new teammates to finish them off. Gradually, he reached the last goblin. Just as Demacia was about to slow down and track it to the ruins, a strong sense of danger washed over him. He shivered and reflexively brought his scimitar up to guard himself. A black shadow flashed by, colliding with immense force against his scimitar, which shattered on impact. Moreover, the force didn't dissipate, striking him fiercely in the chest. Even his black iron lower rank epic heavy armor was torn apart like paper. Demacia felt a dull ache in his chest, his consciousness blurred momentarily, and he was flung backward by the impact. He slammed into a giant tree behind him and spat out a mouthful of blood as half his health bar vanished. If not for the pain sensation being reduced by 95%, he'd have likely fainted from the pain. He looked up in shock, seeing a burly, menacing figure in front of him. Half-beast Blackstone slowly retracted her fist. Chapter 68. Looking at the over 2-meter-tall half-beast in front of him, Demacia's face turned green. One hit, with just one hit, he almost lost his ability to move. Seeing the constantly flashing crippled status in the corner of his game system, Demacia felt increasingly terrified of the opponent's strength. Aside from Euler's embodiment, he had never faced such a powerful attack directly. But Euler's embodiment was special. Since the opponent was a divine, the players felt it was understandable for her to be so fearsome. Not to mention, Euler was the storyline boss, whom they believed must be weakened by the developers to some degree. The embodiment state was unstable, otherwise, she wouldn't have been overwhelmed by their overwhelming numbers strategy. But the ugly, suspected beastman monster in front of him was different. Unlike the incomplete Euler embodiment, he had no weaknesses, just one hit could incapacitate Demacia. And the opponent looked relaxed. This kind of monster was truly terrifying. Demacia had no doubt that even if the players charged in waves, such a powerful monster would spell certain death for them. It was akin to a group of chicks charging at a hunting dog. Damn, did I really run into a game-ending monster? Demacia cursed inwardly. It seemed he was about to die this time. However, Demacia still fulfilled his duty as a leader beforehand. He turned and shouted to those behind him. We've run into an open-world boss, everyone retreat. I'll hold it off. The voice was quite solemn. But right after he said that, he was stunned. Because there was not a single shadow left behind him. The breeze blew, and only one leaf wobbled down. Farther away, he could see a few tall figures running desperately. Demacia. Looking at the fleeing figures of his teammates, he muttered bitterly. Wow, you guys sure ran off quickly, didn't you? Sighing, he looked at the half-beast before him and stretched his neck. Come on then, make it quick. He waited for the opponent to finish him off, a picture of righteous bravery and fearlessness. Looking at the elf in front of him, Blackstone raised an eyebrow. This elf had some backbone. From the giant mountain priest, Blackstone had also learned that these elves might have some form of immortality. However, he also believed that there must be some limitations to their kind of immortality. In his early years, he had dealings with an undead mage and learned some secrets of death. It was rumored that some followers of the death god indeed had immortality, but it was at the cost of weakening their souls with every revival. Every physical death and soul separation caused irreparable damage. And after several repetitions, the soul would collapse. So, in Blackstone's view, even if the other party had some form of immortality, they would not be willing to die repeatedly. After all, no living being could achieve true immortality. They only delayed death. Furthermore, soul collapse was a more despairing death than regular death. Thinking of this, he grew a bit of respect for the elf. At this moment, a few more half-beasts joined them, intending to pursue the other fleeing elves. However, Blackstone quickly stopped them. No need, this elf should be the leader. As long as we capture him, he surely knows the most. After speaking, Blackstone waved his hand. You guys, tie him up. A few ugly half-beasts gathered, roughly snatching the half-broken scimitar from Demacia's hands and aggressively tying him up with hemp rope. Watching the half-beast's actions, Demacia was stunned. Wait, why wasn't this boss playing by the usual rules? In this situation, wouldn't regular enemies just stomp the player to death? Why were they tying him up? Hold on. Was he about to trigger some hidden storyline? A sudden flash of inspiration crossed his mind, and Demacia recalled some elf intelligence the Holy Daughter Sister had once mentioned. Half-beast hunting team. Hunting elves. Human trafficking. Wait. Had he run into a half-beast hunting team? Demacia's eyes began to light up. Half-beasts were the elves' greatest enemies. Holy cow! Hidden storyline. It absolutely was a hidden storyline. In an instant, his previous sadness over potentially losing a chance for a perfect resurrection and having his equipment destroyed disappeared completely. Seeing the captured elf not at all afraid, nor angry, but instead looking excited, Blackstone furrowed his brows with suspicion. This elf, did he have mental issues? Shaking his head, he waved to his subordinates. Let's head back to the base first. After capturing an elf, he no longer planned to stay here. He feared attracting the powerful death gods favored. Anyway, this elf had luxurious equipment and looked to be a leader-level figure, surely knowledgeable. Although his strength was a bit lacking. Even though he had prepared for this scenario, Blackstone hadn't expected the elf clan to have weakened to such an extent. Black iron lower, as fragile as paper. He cast a disdainful glance at Demacia. Once Blackstone finished speaking, a half-beast picked Demacia up in reverse. Whoa, not my chest, I've got wounds, I'm gonna suffocate. Demacia shouted. The half-beast glanced at him, grabbed his leg, and hung him upside down on his shoulder. Demacia. His face turned green. Food, my lunch is coming up. Ugh. But this time, no one paid attention to him. And so, a group of half-beasts took their upside-down spoils of war and marched grandly back. Demacia was bound tightly, and the half-beast's uneven steps were almost about to churn his stomach. Yet at this moment, he wasn't afraid or worried. Instead, his mind was full of excitement. He realized that this group of half-beasts probably wouldn't kill him. They seemed to want to capture him for some purpose. For some purpose. Wait. Surely these half-beasts didn't have such bizarre tastes, right? For a moment, Demacia shuddered. Especially after looking at Blackstone's muscular build and menacing appearance. He felt a bit timid, his complexion turning a faint shade of blue. No. The half-beasts needed to sell him, and buyers wouldn't want second-hand goods, right? Demacia shook his head, reassuring himself. Whatever, at worst, he'd find a way to respawn back to town. He wondered if elves could die from biting their tongues. But then again, that type of death from those Wuxia novels on Blue Star, it didn't seem very scientific. Or maybe, he could crash into a wall? Or a tree? Demacia started to fantasize wildly. But one thing was certain, he was temporarily safe. Thinking of this, Demacia simply gave up on overthinking, and instead, his courage grew. He started chatting incessantly with the half-beasts, attempting to extract information from them and see if he could trigger any events. Hey, big guys, are you half-beasts? Your big tusks are so long. But quite yellow, how long has it been since you brushed your teeth? Your scimitars look so sharp. So, what level are they? Are they legendary items? Can I touch them? Tin head. Hey, you in front, how high level are you? Are you guys the legendary elf hunting team? Are you capturing me to sell? Where are you taking me? You aren't developing strange ideas about male elves, are you? You know, even though I'm handsome and dashing, but I think some things are more appropriate with ladies, don't you think? Actually. I ate a lot of spicy food at lunch, so right now, my whole intestines are burning, and I have hemorrhoids. So, what's your plan? Tell me, I've already been captured. Hey, can't you respond? It's boring talking to myself. Hey. Demacia went on and on like a never-stopping machine gun. Finally, Blackstone couldn't take it anymore. Shut up! He scolded angrily, grabbing a goblin nearby, tearing off its smelly broken pants, stuffing them into Demacia's mouth, and covering his head with a sack. The whole world was quiet. Demacia. Chapter 69. Brother Mew. Something's happened. Demacia has been captured. Li Mew, who was attending a class on arrays at the Natural Temple, had his train of thought interrupted by a flurry of messages from friends. He checked the game system panel and found that the message came from the vice-captain of Demacia's field squad. Demacia was captured? He was taken aback for a moment and began to reply through the system. What's going on? Soon, there was a reply. We encountered a very strong monster in the wild, and Demacia was taken. Those monsters look very fierce, much like the half-beasts that Alice described. Half-beast? Li Mew frowned. Suddenly, he had a thought. Could it be, the squad of half-beasts that Alice mentioned, the ones who hunt elves? How strong are they? Where did they take Demacia? Li Mew replied again. Those monsters are really tough, they took down Demasha with just one punch. We ran away on the spot, and then couldn't get in touch with him. One punch. Li Mu took a sharp breath. Demasha was the number 1 tank in the entire server, with a ridiculous amount of health, and they took him out with one punch. Just how strong are these guys? But soon, another thought struck him. He quickly replied. This might not be a bad thing. Knowing Demasha, he might be triggering some kind of plot mission. Keep an eye out for any messages from him. I think he might be under control now, but as soon as he's free, he'll definitely get back to us. After sending the message to friends, Li Mu thought about it and decided to inform Alice immediately. From any angle, given the current strength of the players, they would be incapable of dealing with half-beasts. If necessary, they would need to seek help from NPCs. He had already raised his rapport with Alice quite high, even higher than that of a cooing bird. If he needed help, the kind holy daughter-sister probably wouldn't refuse. He took a deep breath, then stood up from the mat. Lord Alice, I'm sorry to interrupt your lecture, but I have something urgent to tell you. When Demasha's hood was removed, he found himself in a dark cave. He was tied to an iron rack, and in front of him stood several half-beasts with faces that could scare children to tears. The Black Stone, who had taken him out with a punch, was front and center, along with a half-beast priest clad in sheepskin. A group of burly figures surrounded him, causing him to shiver involuntarily. Especially the imposing, fierce bald Black Stone leading them. Black Stone stepped forward and pulled the cloth out of his mouth. Demasha breathed deeply in relief but nearly choked on the nauseating smell of the cave. At this moment, the half-beasts finally spoke. Speak, what were you doing in Felenqui? What's your conspiracy? Who's the mastermind behind this? Blackstone's deep voice resounded with strong pressure. Upon hearing the half-beast's words, Demasha was momentarily stunned. Hey? It seems they aren't here to hunt me. Are they, investigating the matters from before in Felenqui? His mind was quick, and he instantly pieced together the backstory. If he wasn't mistaken, the main followers of the winter and the hunting god Uller seemed to be half-beasts, and they had just dismantled Uller's avatar the other day. So, the juniors are here to avenge the seniors? Demasha felt like he had uncovered the truth. Meanwhile, he thought of the main storyline's name. Act 1, Uller's Conspiracy. Main plot. He had definitely encountered the main plot again. Could this be Uller's revenge for the trouble they caused? Demasha's spirits lifted. Hurry up and talk. Blackstone coldly snorted again, then grabbed a red-hot iron from the campfire. And in the distance, Demasha also saw a whip, a wolf fang club, an iron rod, knives with barbs, and other items. He twitched his eyes. Is this, torture about to begin? He glanced at the pain setting in the system. 5%, I should be able to handle it. Surrendering and confessing is out of the question. Only by standing firm can I maintain my heroic persona. Besides, knowing it's part of the main storyline, there's no way I, as the goddess's most loyal follower, would spill the secrets to the enemies, right? With this thought, he grinned at the half-beast, showing a row of white teeth. Sweet child, even if you call me daddy, I still won't tell you anything. Humph. An angry flash passed in Blackstone's eyes, and he pressed the hot iron against Demasha's chest. With a sizzling sound, the aroma of grilled meat filled the air. Demasha's eyes nearly bulged out, and then he let out an ecstatic moan. A moment later, he sighed contentedly. It feels kind of nice, you can do it a bit longer. Blackstone. This guy, is he really this tough? The half-beasts gave him a startled look. Humph. A stubborn elf. Blackstone tossed the iron aside and picked up the whip. Demasha's eyelid twitched as he shouted. Anything but the face, you can hit me anywhere else. Pia. Blackstone whipped him across the face. Demasha. Blackstone continued with clubbing, slicing, nail-pulling. He tried every method of torture he had learned from the human world, but the elf before him remained unfazed. He really doesn't care about the pain. Except for when hit on the face. Even Blackstone began to develop a sense of respect. As expected of a follower of the death god, facing pain and death with such calmness. Elf, you truly are a warrior. He grunted, acknowledging. Upon hearing this, Demasha hesitated slightly. Wait. Death god? Wasn't I part of the goddess's crew? How did I become a follower of the death god? Seeing Dimesha's puzzled expression, Blackstone sneered. Surprised? He put down his instruments of torture and continued to ask. In fact, we already know your identities. Talk, what are the death god and the lord of the underworld plotting? Death god? Dimesha had a peculiar look on his face. Wait, is there some misunderstanding here? Seeing your expression, have you finally admitted it? Blackstone sneered. Dimesha. What if I say I don't know anything about a death god, would you believe me? He tried probing. Blackstone sneered again. Dimesha. I really don't know any death god. He repeated with some frustration. Blackstone still sneered. Dimesha. After a moment, he sighed. Fine. Alright, I can't argue with you guys, I'll go ahead and tell you the truth. It's just the death god, right? Actually, I know, and it's no big deal telling you. As he spoke, Dimesha's expression turned serious. Seeing this, the half-beasts also grew serious. Dimesha suddenly raised his head, exuding a bit of dominance, and said in a deep voice. Actually, my name is Thanos, my true identity is the leader of the Soul Society's Guardian Court 13 Team's 5th Division Captain. My mission in Felenqui is to find the 7 Dragon Balls, to make a wish to the goddess, thereby obtaining the Mangeki Sharingan, and ultimately finding the legendary great treasure left by Pirate King Jack Sparrow. Blackstone and the others were dumbfounded by his words. Soul Society? Guardian Court 13 Team? Dragon Balls? Sharingan? Treasure? What kind of nonsense is this? Chapter 70. In the Natural Temple. Alice listened to Li Mu's report with a heavy expression and a furrowed brow. You mean, there's a good chance that Dimesha has been hunted by the half-beasts? Because of your limited strength, you wish to request my assistance? Li Mu nodded. That's right, Lord Alice. You also know that we have a way to track our companions' locations, so we know where Dimesha is now. When Dimesha was captured, he was still part of a team with his teammates, so his coordinates were displayed on the system's minimap. Therefore, although unable to contact him temporarily, players could still locate him. After spending so much time together, Alice and Berserker were also aware of these things. I think, since the half-beasts captured him, it also represents an opportunity. Didn't you once say that half-beasts likely have a base in the elf forest? I believe this is a chance to destroy that half-beast base in one blow. After speaking, Li Mu saw Alice's somewhat hesitant expression and continued. Besides, I think the goddess would also be pleased with this. Mother Goddess. At those words, Alice's heart was stirred. However, her expression showed some conflict. After a moment, she sighed. It's not that I'm unwilling to help, but since the half-beasts have a base, it's very likely they have a half-beast priest. As she finished speaking, she glanced at Li Mu and explained. You know the Mother Goddess has many enemies. Although she has awakened, to ensure safety, she cannot come to the forefront to avoid a crazy backlash from her enemies. So, as her believers and followers, Berserker and I certainly can't appear before the followers of other divines, because that could easily expose the Mother Goddess resurrection prematurely. However, you all are different. You aren't believers, and your souls are peculiar, so you won't arouse suspicion. Listening to Alice's words, Li Mu couldn't help but let out a bitter smile. But I estimate that our strength isn't enough to defeat the half-beasts. Their leader knocked out Dimesha with just one hit. One hit. Alice fell into contemplation, her expression becoming solemn. That would likely be a black iron upper half-orc warrior. You're indeed no match for half-beasts of that level. After thinking for a moment, she said. This matter. I'll pray to the Mother Goddess. The Mother Goddess is merciful and all-knowing, she will certainly give us guidance. Having said that, she approached Eve's statue and began to pray with closed eyes. When Eve sensed Alice's prayer, she was engrossed in an e-book called Game Planning Essentials through the Blue Planets Network. Alice? Did something happen with the players again? Her heart stirred, and she temporarily paused her reading. Although there was a game system, Eve couldn't possibly monitor the players' movements at all times. Therefore, she had previously instructed Alice to pray and report to her immediately if any issues or incidents occurred with the players. Now it seemed like something happened with the players again. She glanced at the blue light clusters in the divine space representing the players and found nothing amiss. Feeling a bit relieved, Eve listened to Alice's prayer. After a while, her mood turned a bit odd. Demacia got captured by the half-beasts? The players are requesting Alice's help. Contemplatively, she immersed her consciousness into the light cluster representing Demacia. Suddenly, her vision shifted dramatically, and Eve quickly saw Demacia's predicament. In the dim stone cave, Demacia was covered in wounds, tied tightly to a stone pillar. It seemed he had been subjected to harsh interrogation, as he was surrounded by a group of half-beasts. This wasn't just a simple hunt but an interrogation. Combining it with the half-beast's conversation, Eve quickly deduced the truth. Who knew Euler would send someone to investigate so quickly? Her heart suddenly felt a sense of urgency. And seeing the serious expressions of the half-beasts, Eve's heart skipped a beat. Wait. Did Demacia spill something he shouldn't have under interrogation? At this point, the leading half-beast spoke. You say your name is Thanos? That you're a captain of a squad under the Death God? What is the Soul Society? What's a Dragon Ball and Sharingan? Who is Jack Sparrow? What is his treasure? Blackstone stared intently at Demacia, asking each question word by word. Eve. What on earth is all this nonsense? For a moment, she was taken aback, thinking she had traveled back to some middle school anime club on the blue planet. And seeing Blackstone asking earnestly, Demacia was also stunned. Heavens, I was just talking nonsense, and they actually believed it. He muttered softly. This, definitely needed explanation. As the renowned noble race of Segis world, elves were always known for unity, kindness, and honesty. In their worldview, the concept of a lie did not exist at all. This means elves wouldn't lie. If they said anything, it was undoubtedly the truth. This had become the stereotype of the elf clan in the Segis world. Thus, after hearing Demacia's words, the half-beasts, though bewildered, did not doubt their authenticity. Upon hearing Demacia's soft mutter, Eve quickly pieced together most of the backstory. Did Demacia start babbling nonsense during interrogation? Thinking about it, players weren't afraid of torture, they wouldn't casually reveal their secrets. But, teasing NPCs was something they were very likely to do. And seeing the half-beasts actually believe him, Demacia felt a twinge of mischief and continued to babble. Ahem. Soul Society is where the Death God resides. Dragon Balls are precious artifacts. It's said that if you gather all 7, you can summon a divine dragon and have your wishes granted. The Sharingan is a powerful bloodline magic. As for Jack Sparrow, he's a great hero from the human world. Obtaining his treasure grants the greatest wealth, fame, and power. Demacia rattled off. Eve. And the half-beasts continued to be utterly baffled. This. Why could each word he said be understood individually, but when combined, made no sense? At this moment, the soul half-beast priest pondered momentarily and suddenly exclaimed in realization. I understand now. Demacia looked at him in surprise. He understood what? Eve was equally baffled. He understood what? Blackstone's eyes flashed as he respectfully looked at the soul priest. Lord Priest, what did you discover? Despite being far stronger than this black iron lower half-beast priest, as a servant of the divine, a priest deserved his respect. The priest took a deep breath and said. Divine dragon, powerful magic, mysterious treasures. Lord Blackstone, these messages are incomprehensible to us and must be some form of encryption, perhaps a prophecy. Though we cannot decipher it, if we report this to the Father God, he will surely unravel its secrets. The priest's expression turned fervent. Lord Blackstone, I hope you can immediately assist me in setting up a sacrifice ritual to inform the true God of the information we've obtained. By reporting this to His Eminence first, we will certainly receive the Father God's blessings. He wasn't a fanatic, unless his soul ascended to the divine country after death. The power of faith wasn't sufficient for direct communication with the divine across planes, necessitating a ritual. After hearing the priest's words, Demacia and Eve fell silent for a moment. Blessings? It might not be more than a lashing. A moment later, Eve sighed inwardly. Considering how these half-wits have chased the elves to near extinction, the elves must be astonishingly wise. But then again, weren't the elves inherently straightforward? Regardless, since the half-beasts seemed so foolish, there was little to worry about. A sacrificial array? Eve inspected the place, finding no statue of Euler, meaning setting up an interplanar sacrificial array would be quite a hassle, requiring numerous materials. Which, incidentally, presented an opportunity for the players. If tackled correctly, even if players weren't strong, they could still pull a fast one on them. And perhaps even enjoy a rewarding wave of life energy for herself. With this in mind, Eve pondered, preparing to issue a task. Just then, she suddenly noticed the stone prison within the cave. Her gaze sharpened instantly. Ha, so it really is the elf hunting team's base. Eve's voice carried a trace of chilling coldness and murder. Pausing for a moment, she edited the original task and connected with Alice. Chapter 71. The Mother Goddess has already responded to me, and she will soon reveal the divine message directly to you all. Inside the natural temple, Alice looked at Li Mu with delight. However, gradually, her expression became solemn. After a moment, she sighed. This time, I will go with you. Hey! Li Mu was slightly taken aback. Weren't we worried about being exposed? Alice glanced at him and explained. The Mother Goddess issued a divine decree. There are still our clansmen held captive by the half-beasts. Elves never abandon their companions. So, no matter what, I must go and see. But don't worry. The Mother Goddess has her plans, and I won't be reckless either. In fact, with the Avatar now, theoretically Eve's strength in her incarnation was enough to directly take down the half-beasts. Yet, for some reason, whenever Eve had such thoughts, a sense of unease arose within her. The premonition of a true god is extremely accurate, so she decided to leave everything to the players and NPCs first, and observe secretly for a while. And not long after Alice finished speaking, the players also received a system notification. Ding! Player Demasha has triggered the task, Half-Beast Hunting Team. Task objective, eliminate all enemies at the Half-Beast base. Rescue the elven companions captured by the half-beasts. Task duration, unlimited. Task participants, unlimited. Task level, 10+. Task rewards, experience points, perfect resurrection, contribution points. Demasha was initially stunned but then overjoyed. Holy crap! I knew it! His shout drew the attention of a group of half-beasts, who looked at him as if he were an idiot. But soon, he was stunned again. Rescue companions? Are they talking about me? Blackstone glanced at him and commanded. Throw this guy in the cell. After speaking, a few half-beasts came forward, grabbed Demasha, and locked him in the cell. Yet Demasha was unfazed, his attention was fully focused on the system interface in his vision. This task was different from others, as it even came with a storyline introduction, which he found very engaging. Task Story Introduction. As the greatest enemy of the elf clan, the half-beast hunting team has continuously threatened the safety of the elves. After centuries of hunting and capture, countless elves have fallen victim to them, and the once glorious race has gradually declined. And now, the half-beast hunting team has finally set their evil sights on you. Observing your unlimited resurrection ability, they suspect you have ties to the death god and have subjected you to severe torture. As a brave and fearless chosen one, you did not bow to the dark forces but refused to compromise, cleverly using lies to deceive the half-beasts. The half-beasts fell for it. They decided to present your lies as truth to the winter and hunting god Uller. Meanwhile, you were thrown into a cell. Seeing the continuous flow of system messages, Demasha's expression became excited. So advanced. Such a high-level hidden task. It could even dynamically generate a storyline based on my actions. And then, the story continued. Now, it's time to use your wit and intelligence again. By observing the half-beasts, you discover they must use a sacrificial array to contact the true god, which gave you some ideas. At this, Demasha was stunned. Hey? Do the half-beasts need a sacrifice to contact the true god? Isn't praying enough? The priest did mention it just now. Wait. I don't really have any ideas. Demasha mentally complained. And the story continued. The half-beasts are immensely powerful, and you do not believe the chosen ones can defeat them. Thus, you must seek NPC assistance. And because of the presence of the half-beast priest, Alice and the berserker couldn't intervene directly. Demasha. I think it is at this moment you suddenly recall some knowledge about the sacrificial array, which might help you deal with the half-beast priest. Once the half-beast priest is out of the way, the goddess's favored ones will not have any worries, enabling them to attack the remaining half-beasts. Demacia. Can it work like this? He read on in astonishment. Wait, since when do I know how to handle arrays? And I'm tied up, what can I do? He muttered to himself internally. But in your current situation, doing this is impossible. It is then you think of your teammates. In your heart, a plan begins to form. Demacia. Is this possible? Wait, why does this feel like a predestined event? Everything laid out clearly? Never mind, there's no time to worry about it, contacting my teammates is the priority. Complete the task, complete the task. This must be a task hint. Speaking of which, he's been captured for so long, he forgot to contact his teammates. Thinking of this, Demacia quickly opened his friend list in his mind, and was startled to see there were 99 plus messages. All of them were asking about his safety, and the task. Taking a deep breath, Demacia excitedly contacted Li Mu. Brother Mu, ha ha ha. I've activated another task. It's the half-beast hunting team. And I've thought of an excellent idea to wipe them out in one go. While glancing at the system information, he eagerly shared everything with Li Mu on the other end. Meanwhile, in the natural temple, Li Mu, who received Demacia's message, was astonished. This guy, sure is lucky, isn't he? After some exchange, the two quickly reached an agreement. I've got it, your plan is indeed good. I'll contact the nearest Black Iron players to you and have them team up with you. I'll also reach out to Little Xian Miao, Boxed Lunch, and have Alice and the Berserker support you and assist in completing the task. Li Mu replied in the message. After thinking for a bit, he added. You must hold on, no matter what happens, don't die, otherwise the coordinates will be lost. And you need to take good care of the captured elves. Demacia. You guys save the location first. This place is so damn dirty and stinky, I want to suicide back to town. Wait, you said captured elves? Isn't it me? He replied. You fool. It's the elf clan members, they're the hostages. Look carefully. Just hold your breath if it's filthy, turn off your sense of smell if it's stinky. Li Mu replied. Demacia. All right. Hurry up and come, I don't want to stay here a second longer. He replied with sorrow. At this moment, a clear voice interrupted his thoughts. Are you okay? Demacia was startled, and when he turned around, he saw three small figures in the cell. As his gaze fell on their delicate features and pointed ears, he couldn't help but excitedly shout. Holy crap! Elves! There were actually elves here. The most up-to-date novels are published on Fruitnoelo. There really were hostages. They were three frail elves. They were grimy, seemingly very young, appearing about 12 or 13 years old. One male and two females. And the one who bravely approached to speak to Demacia was the only young male elf. The two female elves timidly hid behind him. Their appearance was disheveled, their expressions tinged with a hint of anxiety and fear, but their eyes held unprecedented purity. You're bleeding a lot. The young elf said timidly, with a hint of concern in his voice. The black and white eyes, the innocent gaze they cast at Demacia, filled with genuine concern, instantly reminded him of a pure little angel. His expression grew complex for a moment. After a moment, he sighed. Sigh. Brother Mu, I've changed my mind. I'm not in a rush to leave. You all hurry up and come over, I promise not to act recklessly and will stay put. Oh right, when you come, bring some tasty berries and 3 sets of clean clothes. Chapter 72. Demacia discovered 3 young elves in the half-beast stronghold's prison. When he posted the screenshot on the forum, the players exploded almost instantly. Humans were creatures rich in emotions, with a natural sympathy for the weak. At the same time, most people lacked the ability to resist cute, adorable creatures. And young elves perfectly fit this description. Their big eyes were incomparably innocent, and their fair, tender skin seemed as if it would break with a gentle touch. Their not yet fully grown appearance was undoubtedly pure and cute. Additionally, their dirty clothes, the occasional show of panic and despair in their expressions, and the faint wariness and aloofness they inadvertently exuded made the 3 young elves look like bullied little kittens. In an instant, all the players' sympathy flooded in. So cute, no, so pitiful. Even though it's a game, those expressions are just unfair, aren't they? The half-beasts are too much, having the nerve to target our noble and beautiful elf clan. Count me in for this mission. Demacia, you stay put and don't mess around. Demacia. Let's go, go, go. Let's rescue our elf companions. Here we come. Here we come. The players, who had already been excited by the hidden mission, became even more enthusiastic. In Eve's perception, she surprisingly discovered that the players accepting the mission grew from mere dozens to hundreds very quickly. They all joined Demacia's team and began moving in groups of 3s and 2s towards the stronghold. The reason wasn't just the mission's rewards but also Demacia's screenshot. In the end, Li Mu even had to open a group voice chat specifically to start directing the team and prevent the players from rushing in and messing things up. You bunch of Bishounen and lowly fans. Eve was silently speechless. As the sun set in the west, in the southeast region of the elf forest, 4 black iron lower half beasts were walking through the forest. They were carrying a dead unicorn wind deer in their hands. It was a black iron lower level demon beast, and its blood contained strong magic conducting qualities, making it excellent material for carving arrays. However, this type of beast was hard to find, and the half-beasts had gone to great lengths to finally capture it. They chatted as they walked. Ah, it wasn't easy. We spent an entire day hunting a wind deer. I wonder if Lord Priest would be angry. No choice, the forest in this area is too barren. If you ask me, Lord Priest is too impatient. Does he really need to set the array to communicate with Father God right now? Well, you don't know. Reporting secrets to the tribe can't compete with the rewards from directly reporting to Father God's excellency. True that. But as they walked, the leading half-beast suddenly stopped. Wait. With a serious expression, he looked around. Something's off, it's too quiet here. After saying this, he sniffed the air. In an instant, his face changed. Not good, there's an enemy. As soon as he finished speaking, with a shout of attack, an onslaught of magical waves came from all directions, fireballs, wind blades, thunder strikes, rained down on them like a storm. The 4 half-beasts were stunned. Panicking, they tossed away their prey and began to evade. But even so, due to the sheer density of the magic, they were unfortunately hit, quickly sustaining injuries, with the worst off even losing an arm. Before they could react, another identical shout came. Go! With a clattering sound, over a dozen tall figures suddenly appeared from all around. They were all dressed in luxurious equipment, faces filled with excitement, wielding weapons and charging towards them with cries of "Yura" and "Charge," looking like they had seen their father's killers. Where did these elves come from? How did the elves know they were here? Seeing the 4 bewildered half-beasts, Li Mu smirked, casting a vine technique as he commanded. Everyone, don't go all out. They're strong, but we have numbers, we can wear them out bit by bit. He added another line. Don't hit their faces. They had been lying in ambush here for a long time. Due to contact with Demacia, the half-beasts' movements were fully under the players' control. Since the half-beasts wanted to create a sacrificial array, they inevitably had to hunt demon beasts in the forest. The specific demon beasts they needed were far from their stronghold, especially the primary game, the unicorn wind deer, which the players conveniently knew the location of. Through Demacia's shared mini-map, Li Mu deduced that this was the inevitable path of the half-beasts returning, so they had been ambushing here with a group of players for a while. Now, they finally caught them. The half-beasts were strong, and although the players had also reached black iron lower levels, their combat experience was far inferior. However, because the players didn't fear pain or death, when they truly fought the half-beasts, they showed an almost suicidal determination, leaving the half-beasts handicapped. Even so, several players fell in the initial engagement. But there were so many players that despite the half-beast's strength, they were still outnumbered, with wounds accumulating on their bodies. When the levels were similar or marginally higher, a strategy of overwhelming numbers was always a killer tactic for the players. The players were destined to become the nightmare of enemies not too different from them in strength. They're crazy. They must be crazy. Facing a group of fearless elves, the 4 half-beasts grew terrified. Their retreat was accompanied by loud, desperate cries. We surrender! We surrender! We are willing to leave the elf forest, please stop attacking. Having said this, the leading half-beast grinned slightly. This was their killer tactic. Elves loved peace. As long as they were willing to yield, these straightforward long-eared creatures would show mercy and not pursue relentlessly. This was long-standing wisdom from the half-beast's years of elf hunting, a method that never failed. But this time, the elves did not stop. Surrender? Haha, we don't take prisoners, you're better off becoming contribution points and experience. The players chuckled and intensified their assault. They're about to fall. Kill them. Defeat the evil half-beasts and rescue our kin. Yura. Hearing the elves' shouts, and seeing the bloodlust in their eyes, the half-beasts stood stunned. Wait a minute. They would pursue to the very end. When had these elves become so bloodthirsty? For a moment, the half-beasts found themselves inexplicably fearful, feeling their understanding of elves collapsing in an instant. Are they, really elves? Murmured in disbelief as they looked upon the menacing, distorted attractive faces. The players gave them no chance for further thought, launching various skills in a frenzy against the half-beasts. One player delivered a strike, retreating immediately for others to follow up. The coordination was incredibly tight. Finally, the first half-beast couldn't hold on any longer. Struck in the chest, he slowly fell to the ground. After the first half-beast fell, the players' momentum only grew stronger, and the remaining ones gradually couldn't hold on anymore. In the end, at the cost of 8 player casualties, the final half-beast fell to a flurry of blows. Immediately, the group of players eagerly stripped them of their clothes and began to roll for loot. Li Mu did not join in. Instead, he looked at the half-beast's blood-soaked corpses with a solemn expression. I didn't expect the half-beast's combat ability to be so formidable. Their ambush consisted of 27 players above level 11, yet they suffered such significant casualties. And these were only black iron lower half-beasts. Li Mu couldn't help but sigh, realizing that the combat prowess of intelligent creatures and mindless demon beasts simply couldn't be compared at the same level. He sighed and called out to an elf girl in the team. Little Xian Miao, start disguising them for the others. Chapter 73. El was 80 years old this year. Since he could remember, he often heard his grandfather talk about the once glorious history of their race. Once, they owned the world's largest empire. Once, they established the world's most splendid civilization. However, after that disaster, the people fell in ranks, bore curses, and gradually declined. He could not imagine how prosperous the tribe had been 1,000 years ago. To him, such a flourishing era seemed like a mythical legend. In his memory, the days were always about hiding and wandering. However, his grandfather believed everything would get better. El, remember, we are the great silver race. Our current decline is only temporary. Once the mother goddess returns, our era will come again. His grandfather often said this. El had once asked his grandfather, who was the mother goddess. And his grandfather told him that the mother goddess was the greatest existence in this world, the true ruler of the world, and their benevolent mother who sheltered them. So, we also have our own divine? He asked excitedly. Silly child. Grandfather patted his head, his expression fervent and devout. The mother goddess was not just any divine, but a true ancient goddess. From that day on, El was filled with anticipation for the mother goddess. He longed for a happy, stable life and desired a little garden of his own. However, until the day his grandfather passed away, he still had not seen the return of the mother goddess. Yet, even so, he continued to firmly believe his grandfather's words. Until that day. A group of ferocious-looking half-beasts finally discovered their settlement. After a brutal battle, the young and strong men of the tribe fell in battle, while the women and children became captives. This included him and his 2 younger sisters. And it was then that El realized living a life of hiding and wandering was not the hardest thing. The hardest thing was seeing one's home destroyed, becoming a prisoner. The women of their captured tribe disappeared one after another. They were held in a small stone prison by the half-beasts, with no sight of daylight. Each day, they only had unripe fruit to quell their hunger. According to the half-beasts, they were waiting for a human trade caravan to pass by and planned to sell El and the others for a good price. Humans. El shivered. If half-beasts were demons, then humans were undoubtedly devils. When he was among the tribe, he had heard countless tragic stories of their people who had become human slaves. Those cunning, greedy, and lecherous bastards were capable of anything. At that moment, he even considered starving to death. But when he thought of his 2 younger sisters, his heart softened. El, you are a boy, you must protect your sisters well. That was his grandfather's last advice to him before he passed. Thinking of this, El clenched his fists. Grandfather. I'm so useless. I'm so useless. As time passed, El grew increasingly desperate. However, faced with his two young sisters, he had to be strong and pull himself together. He was constantly thinking about ways to escape, but the half-beasts watched them too closely. This life continued for several months. Until today. With a creak, the long unopened prison door was finally opened. El shivered, looking warily outside, while his two sisters hid behind him like startled deer. Has the day finally come? Are they going to sell us? El clenched his fists, and started to think about how to escape in the chaos. However, the half-beasts didn't enter, but instead threw in a tightly bound figure before turning and leaving. El was slightly startled, looking at the figure. An elf. This was the first fellow member he had seen in months. It was a very strange elf. He was covered in blood, seriously injured, his face was extremely pale, and his breath was weak. But his eyes were exceptionally bright. With just one look, El found himself unable to look away. This tribes person was very different, seeming to carry an aura of fearlessness he had never seen in anyone else before. His gaze was not dull and cloudy like the past tribe members. The corners of his mouth carried a faint smile, with an unique rebelliousness, as if he saw everything in the world very lightly. He even stuck out his tongue fiercely at the half-beasts' backs as they turned. This was an interesting guy. Moreover, he was full of vitality and hope. El had never seen such a presence among the elf tribe. For a moment, his heart was filled with curiosity. After hesitating for a moment, he asked softly. Are you okay? The person seemed startled. When he turned and saw El, he couldn't help but shout. What the heck? An elf? El was startled by his voice, stepping back slightly. He saw the strange elf's face change several times, from joyful to excited to quite complex. El hesitated again and asked. You've lost a lot of blood. Are you really okay? Then El saw the strange elf's expression suddenly become gentle. The elf nodded, coughing up blood while smiling. Cough cough, I'm fine. El. You're coughing up blood. He paid no attention to anything else and hurried forward to help untie him. Were you captured too? He asked curiously while using his cloth to bandage the wounds. After being freed, the strange elf first nodded, then shook his head. No, I'm just a well-behaved tracker. El noticed again that the strange elf spoke very peculiarly. Upon further interaction, El discovered this elf, although odd, was a warm and optimistic person. They began to chat. This strange elf told many interesting stories, which both El and his sisters loved. He knew a lot, and always had ideas that El had never even thought of. Various bizarre and fun stories fascinated El. Gradually, he found himself liking this interesting fellow. And through the conversation, El learned about the elf's origin. He came from a far away place, summoned by the goddess. Goddess? Hearing this word, El became a little curious. Brother Dima, do elves also worship other true gods? At this, he saw the strange elf smile, his expression suddenly becoming a bit profound. No. His expression became devout. He drew a tree-shaped symbol on his chest, saying solemnly. The goddess in my heart, there is only one. Seeing the symbol, El was stunned. Because his grandfather had drawn that symbol countless times. Could the elf's mother goddess really exist? Was he summoned by the mother goddess? For a moment, El felt a little dazed. El. Dazed, El heard the elf calling him. He turned his head, seeing Brother Dima's gaze. Brother Dima was looking towards the outside of the cell, the corners of his mouth slightly curved with a mischievous smile. Following his gaze, El saw 4 more half-beasts in the cave. They were carrying a demon beast that seemed to have been ravaged by magic. Our allies have arrived. El heard the elf say this. Chapter 74. Allies? El looked at the 4 burly and ugly half-beasts and felt a bit bewildered for a moment. Soon, he saw a half-beast wearing a sheepskin approach, checking the corpse of the demon beast and nodding. Well done. Next, you assist me in draining the blood. The blood of the demon beast contained magic power, possessing strong vitality, so even if it had been dead for several hours, as long as it was handled properly, the blood of the unicorn wind deer would not coagulate. El soon saw several half-beasts cut open the deer's neck, slowly draining the viscous blood. The half-beast in the sheepskin then took out a bizarre bone pen, dipped it in the blood and began drawing on the ground. El followed his movements with his eyes, then his expression gradually turned to one of surprise. Hey? A sacrificial array? Does he want to communicate with the divine? You recognize it? Dima, who was beside him, looked at him in astonishment. He was surprised that such a young child could recognize a sacrificial array. El nodded, a hint of nostalgia flickering across his face. Yes, more than 20 years ago, I learned it with my grandfather. More than 20 years ago. Dima almost choked. Cough, cough, cough. He couldn't help but start coughing, spitting up blood again. El quickly looked at him worriedly. Brother Dima, are you okay? Brother. Cough, cough, cough. Dima coughed even more severely. He gave a few dry laughs, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, looked at El strangely, and shook his head. I'm fine. After saying this, he hesitated for a moment and cautiously asked. Well, little guy, cough cough, El, how old are you this year? El scratched his head, a bit shy as he said. If I remember correctly, I just turned 80 this spring. Dima. He started calculating his grandfather's age. Oh no, his great-grandfather's age. Seeing the other party silent, El quickly explained. Brother Dima. Don't be fooled by my mere 80 years. I know a lot of things. I'm not a little kid anymore. Dima. After a moment, he sighed and said. Yes, you're not a little kid. After finishing, he mumbled under his breath. I am. Heaven knows, he had just celebrated his 18th birthday last month. Fortunately, this was just a game. El continued to watch the movements of the half-beast in the sheepskin. As he carved, a large array soon appeared on the ground. Then, the half-beast in the sheepskin knelt before the array and began chanting rhythmic incantations. As he chanted, the red array gradually glowed with a deep light, with waves of magic power continuously gathering. He's going to succeed. El couldn't help but say. Though he didn't know what the half-beasts intended to do, as evil enemies, whatever they planned, it certainly wasn't good. Don't worry, they won't succeed. Beside him, Dima's chuckle rang out. The blood was tampered with. His voice carried a tone of schadenfreude. El glanced strangely at Dima, not understanding why he would say that. But soon, he understood why. At the pinnacle of the array's fluctuations, the originally black-red blood seemed to be affected by some inexplicable force and suddenly started sizzling. Then, the light of the array suddenly began to flicker. The face of the half-beast wearing sheepskin changed. Magic power boiling? No good. There's something wrong with this blood. Before he could say more, the array suddenly burst forth with a red radiance and exploded with a boom. Lord Priest. Blackstone's expression tightened, and he hurriedly stepped forward. The four half-beasts assisting with the bloodletting followed suit. However, when the smoke cleared, the half-beast priest closest to the array was barely clinging to life under the dual assault of magic backlash and the explosion. Blackstone's expression instantly turned grim. At this moment, 3 of the 4 half-beasts suddenly drew their weapons and charged towards him. Their bodies glowed faintly, and in an instant, they transformed into 3 elves. Elves. This all happened in a flash, leaving El dumbstruck. That's right, they're my companions, here to rescue us. Dima smiled. Rescue us. El stared at the elves, his heart filled with shock. Witnessing this sudden turn of events, all the half-beasts stood stunned. Elves. Blackstone was initially dumbfounded, then flew into a rage. A flash of ferocity flickered in his eyes as he kicked the 3 elves, sending them flying. The 3 slammed into the wall, spitting blood, and then collapsed weakly. Humph! Blackstone let out a disdainful snort. Soon, his expression changed. No. He quickly turned and saw the last half-beast stab a dagger into the chest of the half-beast priest lying on the ground. The half-beast priest slightly opened his mouth, a hint of fear and confusion in his eyes, seemingly unaware of what had just happened. He twitched a few times before tilting his head and breathing no more. The half-beast who stabbed him simultaneously transformed into the form of an elf. With grey-black hair and a cold expression, it was Box. Bastard! Blackstone's eyes turned completely red. Half-beasts didn't have mages. Every priest was a precious spellcaster for them. They were responsible for communicating with the divine as well as handling the tribe's support and healing. With the priest dead, even if Blackstone completed this mission, he would still be punished. Blackstone was utterly enraged. He roared and drew his scimitar, slashing towards Box. Box's face was solemn, quickly dodging. He moved like an agile lynx, flipping around, while Blackstone's scimitar struck the ground, carving out a 3-meter deep trench. "Seize this damned bastard!" Blackstone gritted out. The remaining half-beasts roared and simultaneously charged at Box. Box took a deep breath, using the abilities Air Step and Dashing Leap to dodge left and right. "Escape, hurry and escape!" El grasped the bars of the stone cage, his expression tense and anxious. Yet, just as Box was about to break away, a strong hand gripped his shoulder. "Caught you!" Blackstone sneered, increasing his grip. Box's shoulder was pulverized at once, blood spurting everywhere. However, his expression remained indifferent, as if this bit of pain was nothing significant to him. A flash of brutality passed through Blackstone's eyes as he roared. "Die!" He then spread his hands, suddenly clutching Box's head. In El's terrified gaze, Box's skull was forcibly crushed. His body twitched a few times, before slowly collapsing to the ground. "Ah!" El covered his mouth, his pupils quickly clouding with tears. At that moment, a large hand rested on his shoulder. While sobbing, he turned and saw Dima's pale face. Remarkably, this newly acquainted elven brother was neither angry nor saddened but instead smiled slightly. "Don't worry, they aren't dead." Not dead?" El was taken aback, then turned his head back. He was astonished to find that the fallen elven bodies were gradually fading and then slowly disappearing. He, we chosen ones are favored by the goddess, existing as immortals." Beside him, Dima's voice came once more, loaded with unprecedented pride and confidence. Meanwhile, the faint sounds of battle cries and shouts echoed from outside the cave. "Listen, our main force has arrived," Dima said confidently. Chapter 75. When Blackstone saw the slowly disappearing bodies of elves on the ground, he knew something was wrong. And when the shouts from outside faintly reached him, his expression finally changed. "Oh no! We might have been exposed." At the same time, a hint of doubt welled up in his heart. Where did the problem arise? Along this way, the half-beast priest had already erased their tracks, so how could the elves know their whereabouts? And, since when did these straightforward long-eared ones start using schemes? Even now, Blackstone was still having a hard time believing that these proud elves would disguise themselves as the half-beast they despised most, infiltrating them deceitfully and directly killing the priest. This didn't seem like a strategy elves could come up with, but rather those cunning humans. However, at this moment, he couldn't be bothered with so much. These strange elves, seemingly possessing undead power, were weak, but Blackstone dared not bet whether there were more powerful figures behind them. Blackstone was always a cautious person. He never dealt with enemies without a clear grasp on them, nor did he ever lay all his cards on the table. His caution had even brought him ridicule before. Yet even so, Blackstone didn't abandon this quality he learned from humans. Facts proved his caution was correct. Those once mocking reckless fellows had ascended to the divine country in battle after battle. And he was still doing quite well. Only this time, he felt he had inexplicably tripped up. With the priest's death, his mission could already be considered a failure. But fortunately, he still captured an elf. Thinking of this, he turned to look at Dima in the cell, his expression shifting a bit, and finally, gritted his teeth, saying, "Take them with us, we're leaving through the secret passage." He didn't plan to clash head-on with those strange elves. If he could bring the captured elf back and extract secrets from him, maybe he could earn the high priest's forgiveness. Thinking of this, Blackstone already felt like retreating. With his order, the half-beasts dragged Dima and 3 young elves out of the cell and into another secret passage within the cave. This secret passage connected to another hidden underground cave, leading straight to a kilometer away. "Humph, I'll settle this account later." Blackstone gave a hateful glance in the direction of the cave entrance, ordering his men to retreat into the passage. After the last one entered, he took a deep breath and mustered all his strength to slam the cave wall hard. The cave immediately collapsed, blocking the entryway. And Blackstone, at the last moment of the cave's collapse, entered the secret passage. Dozens of half-beasts slowly advanced through the secret passage. And Blackstone continued pondering where exactly the problem lay. Where did it go wrong? He clearly had been very careful, so how had his tracks been exposed? Did the few clansmen who went hunting get caught and leak secrets? But, those half-beasts were warriors he personally selected, who would rather die than betray the tribe. The elves' movements were too fast, so fast he could hardly believe it. It was as if someone was guiding them. All along the way, Blackstone couldn't figure it out. And the half-beast troop finally emerged from the passage. They crawled out of the hidden passage entry, their vision suddenly brightened as they returned to the forest. Blackstone breathed a sigh of relief. No matter what, they were safe. Thinking of this, he sighed with relief, showing a trace of satisfaction on his face. Just then, the surrounding jungle suddenly moved, and more than 100 tall elves suddenly emerged. Blackstone's expression turned rigid. Looking at those well-equipped, exhilarated figures, the corner of his mouth twitched, and he appeared momentarily stunned. Elves? Where did they come from? How did they know he was here? Seeing the half-beast troop, the elves' initially excited expressions became even more elated. We've found them! Look! There's Dima! The 3 little cuties are there too! Get rid of these wicked half-beasts and rescue our kin! Hooray! They shouted and then bravely charged forward. Seeing these reckless elves, a hint of anger flashed in Blackstone's eyes. If they had the strength of silver or black iron upper, that would be one thing. These elves, at most, had the strength of black iron lowers mid-level, and with such power, they thought they could block them. Get out of the way! Blackstone shouted, swinging his wolf fang club to turn an approaching figure into a sieve. Whoa! So fierce! His actions startled the other elves. At this moment, Blackstone heard a detestable voice among the elves. That's the boss! Don't fight him! Everyone just stall the main half-beast force! Boss? Blackstone was momentarily confused. But soon, he realized it referred to himself. Because afterward, all the elves evaded him, starting to entangle other half-beasts. Moreover, more elves began to gang up on the 3 half-beasts guarding the elves. Suddenly, realizing something, Blackstone's expression changed. Oh no! They must be stalling for time. He gritted his teeth, backhandedly slapping several elves attempting to rescue Dima and the others to their deaths, while shouting to the remaining half-beasts. Don't delay with them, we'll break through. However, as soon as he finished speaking, the entire forest ground suddenly began to tremble. Boom! Boom! The sound was thunderous, like the footsteps of a giant. Hearing this, Dima, who was being escorted by the half-beasts, curled his lips. He suddenly shouted. Berserk! Following that, a powerful aura erupted from him. In an instant, Dima's face twisted, his whole body swelled several times, faintly revealing snake-like veins and blood vessels. Berserk! This was a life-risking skill he exchanged for, able to unleash his full potential, bursting out with immense power in an instant. Duration, 10 minutes. Price, death. Seeing him pick up a scimitar from the ground and slash down a half-beast who hadn't reacted yet. Then, he scooped up the other 2 young elves, yelling at L. Let's go! If not now, when? Seeing Dima breaking free in an instant, Blackstone was furious. He wanted to stop him, but suddenly, several thick vines emerged from the ground, halting his movement. The vines were so tough that Blackstone was astonished to find that even with his black iron upper peak strength, level 40, he couldn't break free. Soon after, a massive shadow covered him from above. What is this? Tree! Tree man! Around him, came the panicked voices of other half-beasts. Blackstone's heart tightened, and he hurriedly looked up, then saw a gigantic figure. A body over 30 meters tall, rivaling the dragon clan, with sturdy branches almost blotting out the sun. Those indifferent eyes looked at him as if he were already dead. In an instant, Blackstone's pupils contracted sharply. Oak! Oak Guardian! He nearly lost his voice. Chapter 76. Uncle B is here. Uncle B! Take them down! With the arrival of the Oak Guardian, Berserker, the players erupted in cheers. Berserker stretched out his arms and struck the ground with force, roaring. War! Sacrifice! In an instant, his arms transformed into countless vines, entwining each half-orc. Under the horrified and terrified gazes of the half-orcs, they were wrapped up one by one, their life force stolen, and in the blink of an eye, they turned into shriveled corpses, finally crumbling to ashes. What the hell? Uncle B, don't hit the small ones. Leave the small ones for us. Uncle B. Take out that big guy with the wolf fang club. That bastard killed so many of us. Seeing Berserker wipe out 4 or 5 half-orcs in an instant, the other elves seemed a bit heartbroken. Upon hearing the elves' words, Berserker turned his gaze toward Blackstone again. A sense of life and death crisis suddenly surged in Blackstone's heart. He felt his scalp tingle. Oak Guardian. Blackstone had once served as the Holy Land Guardian, and he was all too familiar with these legendary creatures depicted in the murals. In the Silver Era, tales of Oak Guardians were ubiquitous across the Segis continent. Their power was terrifying, with the strongest even approaching demigod levels, capable of battling legendary giant dragons. Their abilities were incredibly mysterious, and the war sacrifice skill unique to druids granted them unmatched endurance in group battles. Even the weakest Oak Guardian possessed silver-level strength, while their average strength surpassed gold. If not for the fact that Oak Guardians couldn't reproduce, they might have been called the Golden Race on par with dragons. However, what chilled Blackstone more than the legends of the Oak Guardian was the significance of the opponent's appearance. The Oak Guardian could only be enlightened by the World Tree, which controlled the domains of nature and life. Moreover, the life of an Oak Guardian thrived and waned with the World Tree. In an instant, Blackstone understood everything. Behind the elves is not the Death God, but the World Tree. Only the World Tree could enlighten the Oak Guardians. And only the World Tree could earn the loyalty of the elf clan. The strange resurrection ability of the elves was thus explained. The power to resurrect the dead defied the laws, and actions against the laws incurred a backlash from them. Due to the secrets of the soul, this price was reportedly immense. So immense that even a true god was unwilling to bear it. Only those who mastered the divinity associated with life and death could revive the dead at a relatively bearable cost. Among all the true gods, only 2 had ever accomplished such a feat. One was the death god, Hela. And the other was the World Tree, Yggdrasil. Prior to this, Blackstone also believed these peculiar elves were Hela's handiwork, but upon seeing the Oak Guardian, everything was overturned. Then, another figure's appearance further confirmed his guess. Natural Saintess Alice, dressed in a noble sacrificial dress, appeared among the elves. She closed her eyes in prayer, and a brilliant holy light radiated from her as the center, forming a continuously rotating sphere of light, exuding a strong sense of nature and life. Under Alice's direction, the light sphere swiftly moved among the elves, accelerating the healing of wounds on each one it touched. Healing Soul. A 4-circle healing divine art, it was the most potent group healing spell of a silver lower priest. Seeing their injuries recover, the elves grew more excited. Miss Alice's support has arrived. Charge! Take down the half-orcs! They swung their weapons, attacking more frantically and desperately. A silver lower priest. A silver priest devoted to nature. Blackstone's pupils shrank slightly again. Priests and clergy at the silver level could only be sustained by the faith in a true god. At this moment, there was no more suspense to the answer. All that talk about death gods favored was nonsense. Clearly, they were the divine favored of nature. The World Tree has truly revived. In an instant, Blackstone felt his entire body tremble, filled with immense fear. Conquering the ancient god Yggdrasil had always been an epic legend passed down through generations of half-orcs, and the greatest accomplishment for the god of winter and the hunt. Yet now, this legendary true god, this planar dominion of the previous era, had actually revived. Reflecting on the recent disappearances of half-orcs, Blackstone suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. She is seeking revenge. She has returned, she wants revenge on us. She wants revenge on the Father God. The majesty of a true god could not be desecrated. And as the half-orcs who had persecuted the elf clan for millennia, attempting to erase the faith in the World Tree, they probably were now a thorn in the eyes of this ancient god. This news must be delivered back to the tribe. The half-orcs are in danger. In a flash, Blackstone made his decision. Clenching his teeth, he said with hatred. Did they think I had no way to fight back by deploying 2 mid-tier professionals? His caution was never just for show. Suddenly, Blackstone's aura began to rise, a wave of pressure was released. In an instant, his power skyrocketed from black iron upper peak, level 40, to silver lower. Level 45. This was Blackstone's true strength. Earlier, he had been hiding his level. Also silver. In that moment, both Berserker and Alice looked surprised. Then, Blackstone took out a bone fragment with mysterious engravings from his bosom. In an instant, his expression became devout and reverent. Raising the bone fragment high, he murmured something, and a faint ripple of divine power spread out. Not good. Viewing the battle from a player's standpoint, Eve's heart sank. Before she could do anything, the bone fragment in Blackstone's hands emitted a dazzling brilliance, forming a massive energy arrow in the air. Hunting arrow. A true high-tier divine skill, the 8-circle attack divine art mastered by Yggdrasil's priest. A formidable aura was released from the arrow, causing Berserker and Alice's expressions to change dramatically. Everyone, hide quickly. Yet, it was already too late. The energy arrow suddenly bloomed with silver radiance, and then rapidly replicated, forming an energy ring composed of arrows pointing outward. Subsequently, each arrow shot outward in all directions. The largest arrow was aimed directly at the silver mid-tier, level 51, Oak Guardian Berserker. Berserker's face grew solemn, and he roared once more. Oak Barrier. As he spoke, a barrier composed of oak branches appeared in front of him. Alice also gritted her teeth and shouted softly. Natural armor. A green energy shield appeared around everyone. The arrows reached them in an instant, colliding with the barriers and shields, causing a series of violent explosions. Boom! The earth shook. For a moment, everyone's vision went blank. Chapter 77. When Blackstone raised the bone fragment, Eve finally understood what her earlier feeling of unease had been. High-order divine arts. Blackstone actually held a high-order divine art. Hunting arrow. This was an 8-circle divine skill exclusive to the high-order priests who worshipped Uller. The effect of the divine art was to produce a powerful energy arrow with a sure hit characteristic, accompanied by numerous secondary energy arrows, striking the target with precision and causing area attacks around it. This was truly an attack at the gold middle rank level. Even Eve's current avatar could not handle such an attack if caught off guard. If stricken, it was likely to destroy the soul storage orb, not fully repaired yet, causing the avatar to collapse. Not to mention the Oak Guardian, Berserker, who only had silver middle rank strength. The energy arrows exploded, enveloping everything in blinding light and deafening noise. A fierce energy storm raged, snapping the surrounding trees, leaving a scene of devastation. All the players were blinded and deafened in an instant. When the light slowly faded and everything returned to calm, the battlefield before them had completely changed. The place where Berserker once stood had turned into a massive crater with a radius of 12 meters, the soil churned and still emitting white smoke. And Berserker himself had half of his body destroyed, lying on the ground barely alive. The life force of the Oak Guardian was indeed tenacious. Even an 8-circle divine skill didn't kill him, but he had completely lost his combat ability. Of course, this was also because Blackstone had only the strength of a silver lower rank, and he wasn't a spellcaster, unable to master divine arts well. If it had been a silver lower priest wielding it, this strike might have annihilated the entire player side. But even so, the situation on the battlefield was utterly miserable. Alice also lay on the ground, a large hole shot through her chest and abdomen by an energy arrow, with bright red blood flowing continuously. More than half of the players evaporated under the attack of the energy arrows, with not a trace of their bodies visible. The remaining small number, though lucky to survive, lay on the ground severely injured, all losing their combat ability. Only Elle and 2 elven sisters were shielded behind the furious Demasha, narrowly escaping disaster. One blow, just one blow. Although not completely wiped out, it was close enough. There were fewer than 30 surviving players, all having lost their combat ability. The only 2 with silver combat power were also left gasping for life in an instant. On the entire battlefield, only Blackstone and a dozen half-beasts with fight left remained. It was a full 50 kilometers away from the safe zone here. Even if the players were resurrected, there was no way to rush here in time. Moreover, facing Blackstone, who had demonstrated silver strength, the players had no trump card left. All the surviving elves struggled, faces turning pale as they looked at the half-beasts on the field. They were bewildered, seemingly not having recovered from the recent explosion. How did everything turn around in just an instant? They were supposed to be victorious. How did it suddenly turn into a disaster? Damn developers, your mom blew up. Seeing the tragic scene before him, Demasha cursed while spitting blood. Demasha big brother. Elle, worried, helped the pale Demasha up, looking at his terrifying wounds with a helpless expression. The most painful thing in the world was reaching for the pinnacle of hope, only to fall into despair in an instant. When he first saw the Oak Guardian, El also recognized this legendary being. The surrounding determined and fervent tribesmen, as well as the extremely noble Silver Priest, made him excited beyond measure. Could it be that the mother goddess my grandfather spoke of has truly returned? El was immensely exhilarated, feeling something brewing incessantly in his chest. However, before he could continue his excitement, the sudden downward change on the field struck his spirits. The half-beasts were so evil and powerful. Under the divine art's attack, his kinsmen and nature's wards were so effortlessly crushed. For a moment, El was lost. Grandfather, do we really have hope? Holding the constantly coughing blood Demasha, El's eyes were blank, biting his lips hard and clenching his fists. Blackstone was equally stunned by the effect of the divine art in the bone fragment in his hand. 8 circle, it was actually 8 circle. He muttered a few words to himself, his expression fascinatingly complex. Originally, he just planned to steal away amidst the distraction of the divine art's effect, not expecting such a harvest. Looking at the pitiful state of the surrounding elves, the dying Oak Guardian, and the unconscious natural priest, Blackstone's lips curled slightly upward. Hee ha ha, ha ha ha. He couldn't help but burst into laughter. It seems, nature's wards aren't as strong as rumored after all. His heart gradually settled. After all, even if the world tree had recovered, it must have been recent. And the world tree that had just recovered was surely incredibly weak, or else, how could the elves have been up to their tricks in secret all this time? A weak world tree, and the strength of her wards was naturally limited. It seems that this time, I've really achieved a major accomplishment. The world tree has recovered, surely the protective divine arts upon her formation at her fall thousands of years ago have also broken, this too is an opportunity for the Father God to advance further. Thinking of this, Blackstone's eyes flashed, his expression becoming fervent. This time, I am destined to receive the Father God's divine favor. Taking a deep breath, he ordered his shocked subordinates. Take those 3 kids, we're leaving. Having unraveled the secret of the elf forest, there was naturally no need to take prisoners back. Besides, Blackstone also suspected that the elves had some means of locating their comrades. Otherwise, how could I be exposed time and again? But as for the 3 young elves, he certainly wouldn't let them go. These are premium goods. Upon hearing Blackstone's command, the half-beasts exchanged glances, excitedly nodding in agreement. They approached El, rudely pulling him up, slinging him and the 2 sisters over their shoulders. Let go of me! You evil bastards! Let go of me! El shouted and struggled. Yet he couldn't break free. He lifted his head, staring in the direction of the world tree, his expression desperate and angry. Mother Goddess, do you truly exist? If you truly exist, why do you watch as your wards are slain? If you truly exist, why can't you protect your believers? This is your domain! He cried out, laughing and weeping. Looking at the misery of the surrounding elves, the unconscious natural priest, and the barely alive Oak Guardian. Gradually, his expression turned to anguish. Mother Goddess! If you can hear my words, please save your servants. After speaking, El lifted his head, his expression solemn and resolute. I, El Moonlight, swear with my soul to offer my entire life and soul to you, to become your most faithful servant, only wishing you, to protect us, hoping you, could save us. As he spoke, he struggled to extend his hand, imitating the gesture his grandfather taught him from memory, drawing a tree-shaped symbol on his chest slowly. Mother Goddess! Please, manifest a divine miracle. The child's voice was so clear in the silent forest, echoing far away. Seeing the endlessly struggling El, Blackstone let out a cold smirk. But just before he could speak, an ethereal, serene sigh suddenly echoed in everyone's hearts. Sigh. Accompanied by the sigh, a brilliant holy light suddenly blossomed over El's body. Chapter 78. A dazzling light burst forth from El, and the half-beast carrying him suddenly let out a miserable scream. The entire body began to age rapidly, turning into ashes in an instant. At the same time, accompanied by ethereal sacred chants, countless brilliant green photons rose from the ground. They ascended slowly, like countless dancing elemental little elves, densely packed and endless. For a moment, the forest seemed to be immersed in a sea of green. Green photons surrounded the players on the field, spinning and swirling continuously, then eagerly entered their bodies. In the players' astonished gazes, their injuries began to heal rapidly, and even broken limbs gradually regrew. And the severely injured Oak Guardian, Berserker, also began to show signs of life under the embrace of photons. Vigorous branches sprouted anew, quickly growing back the half of the body that had been completely destroyed. The plants on the ground began to grow rapidly with the appearance of photons, sprouting and unfurling leaves, then blooming flowers. In the blink of an eye, a path paved with colorful flowers appeared on the ground, covering every place with greenery and a sea of flowers. Countless butterflies made of photons began to circle El, in whose somewhat bewildered gaze, they flowed into his body. El's aura rapidly increased, instantly leaping past the black iron level and breaking through to silver. Everything felt like a divine miracle. Dima opened his eyes wide, looking incredulously at the glowing little elf boy, rubbing his eyes hard. Holy crap! So the little boy is an NPC triggering the plot. Then, glancing at his fully healed character screen, he pinched his thigh out of instinct. It didn't hurt. But he quickly reacted, raising the pain setting and pinching again, drawing in a cold breath of excitement. It's not a dream. It's a plot animation. The sudden change left the half-beast stunned. An unprecedented sense of crisis struck Blackstone's mind. He instinctively wanted to shout, to command everyone to flee. Yet he was shocked to find he had lost control over his body. At this point, the half-beasts realized countless photons had attached to them, controlling their movements. Soon after, a holy and vast presence suddenly descended upon the scene. Under everyone's shocked gaze, the swirling photons on the ground kept rotating until they formed a human shape. She was a presence shrouded entirely in holy light, dressed in a sacred and noble long gown. She wore the supreme divine crown on her head, and her silver hair reached her waist, while her magnificent and mysterious purple eyes shone with brilliant light. An aura of unassailable majesty permeated everyone's hearts. The players merely glanced at her and could not help but bow their heads, their hearts rising with an innate impulse to worship her. Though only a glance, her unparalleled figure seemed to be etched into their minds, never to be erased. Berserker looked at that noble figure within the holy light, his expression instantly turned fervent. Supporting himself with the ground, he stood up, then respectfully knelt down, his aged and deep voice filled with solemn reverence. "Praise, my lord!" Alice was equally enraptured, kneeling down as well, her clear voice pious and solemn. "Praise, my lord!" But the dozen or so half-beasts wore expressions of terror. In their eyes, they saw only a blinding holy light, unable to see anything else. In an instant, they felt their eyes and souls pierced with pain. Amidst cries of agony, tears of blood flowed from their eyes. One should not gaze directly at a god. Or rather, without the true god's permission, no one could gaze directly at the true god. In that moment, everyone understood. The Mother Nature, goddess of life, and elf sovereign Yggdrasil, had personally descended in embodiment. The goddess first glanced at her two devotees, a smile appearing at the corners of her mouth, and then she slowly walked towards El. With each step she took, a cluster of flowers bloomed on the ground, as if celebrating the miracle of life. The frantically growing plants gently bent with her movements, as if bowing in homage to the Supreme Being. El stared blankly at the sacred figure approaching him, his mind completely blank. The goddess reached him, extended her arm, and gently placed her hand on his forehead. "Remember your vow." Her voice was sacred and authoritative, yet carried a hint of pleasant warmth. As she caressed him, a sacred radiance blossomed on El's forehead, revealing a tree-shaped symbol representing the Mother Nature, which gradually faded away. El's aura changed once more, though his power did not continue to grow, there was a subtle difference. It seemed as if a layer of divine essence had been imparted onto him. It might have been an elevation of life itself. With the goddess's actions, countless photons began to revolve around the two, faint and holy hymns echoed unseen. Divine favor! It's divine favor! Watching the scene unfold, Berserker's expression became fanatical. Upon hearing Berserker's words, the players emerged from their shock. When they lifted their heads and saw the knighting-like figure with the brilliant holy light effects, they were all stunned. This was the third time the players had seen the goddess's figure since character creation and the issuing of the first plot task. But unlike the previous two times, this incarnation of the goddess seemed more real, more majestic and holy, and the descending magnificent effects were more shocking than before. No words could describe the players' current feelings. If there were any, it'd be just two, holy crap. At this moment, the goddess spoke again. Her gaze shifted to the remaining half-beasts on the field, her voice overwhelmingly authoritative. "They are yours now." Hearing the goddess's words, El turned his head blankly, looking at the continuously struggling, howling half-beasts clutching their eyes. For a moment, his expression was somewhat conflicted. Grandfather had once told him to respect life, to treat others with generosity. Grandfather had once said that every creature makes mistakes, but as long as they recognize and correct them, they should be forgiven. But at that moment, El hesitated. In an instant, the image of the slaughter of his kin reappeared in his mind. The half-beast's sinister laughter, the clansman's wails, the despair of a shattered family. Why, despite possessing great power, couldn't the elf clan defeat their enemies? Why, despite being the glorious silver race, did they become the prey of the black iron race? El's expression changed several times before finally growing resolute. Mercy to the enemy is cruelty to oneself. He took a deep breath, picking up a curved blade from the ground. Chapter 79. The half-orcs struggled to open their eyes, looking at El, who approached step by step, pale-faced and lips tightly clenched, with a curved blade in hand, their expressions filled with terror. At this moment, they realized they regained the ability to speak. The half-orc closest to El hurriedly shouted. "Don't come any closer, don't come any closer. We know we were wrong. We will leave the elf forest right away." A hint of hesitation flashed across El's face again. But as he recalled the various hardships his race had endured, his expression finally turned completely cold. "There have been too many times." After saying that, he stood on tiptoe, swung his curved blade, and pierced it into the half-orc's chest. "It's already too late." At the moment the curved blade pierced the chest, the half-orc let out a painful howl, then the entire body began to twitch and rapidly aged, soon turning into ash. War ritual. At the same time as the goddess granted El the natural mark, this skill unique to the druid also became his passive ability. Seeing the fate of their companion, the remaining half-orc's expressions changed drastically. Blackstone couldn't believe his eyes as he looked at this young elf in front of him, overwhelming waves surged in his heart. They have changed, they have changed. And after killing the first half-orc, El looked at his blood-stained hands, his expression growing more determined. "If only war and blood can save the tribe, then let it start with me." After saying this, he turned around and walked toward the next half-orc. The crimson blood splashed on his pale face, reflecting his silver hair and deep blue eyes, making the elf youth appear cold and resolute. "Damn, how handsome! He's like a completely different person." Demacia stared in amazement at El's back with his mouth wide open. This cold and handsome boy is sure to attract a wave of female fans. Isn't there a lot of boy enthusiasts on the forum? He glanced at several surviving female players and found that many of their eyes were shining, almost putting stars in their eyes. Demacia. This era that only values appearances. He tilted his head up 45 degrees, shaking his head in tragic contemplation. But soon, Demacia snapped back to reality and looked at El's actions with a touch of regret. "Damn it! These are all experience points and contribution degrees. El! Leave some for your brother." He hurriedly got up, ready to pick up his curved blade and join the fight, only to find in surprise that his body was unable to move. Demacia! Damn cutscene! He cursed and plopped back down to the ground. The other players noticed this as well. They too were unable to move and could only watch as El killed one half-orc after another, each losing all ability to resist. Eve stood behind El, quietly observing his actions. The elf clan was simply too naive. For the sake of the race's future, the elf clan had to make some changes. In the Segis world, the confrontation between races with different beliefs was cruel and allowed no mercy. If the elf clan wanted to rise again amidst hardships, Eve's support alone was far from enough. They also had to endure the trials of blood and tears, forging an all-new racial soul. The arrival of players was an opportunity, and El's emergence was also a chance. Eve hoped that starting with El, the elf clan could solidify a new racial concept. Peace should not mean weakness, and mercy did not mean retreat. In the face of cruel enemies, one must also show their swords and fangs. Seeing El gradually approach him, Blackstone's pupils contracted. His expression shifted slightly and then he shouted sternly and threatened. "Think carefully, I carry the token of the true God on me, not only that, I also served as the Holy Land Guardian before. If you kill me, it will definitely attract the attention of the Father God." Upon hearing his words, El was silent. Seeing his silence, Blackstone sighed slightly with relief, and then continued. I can swear by my soul, if you let me go, I will never reveal the secrets here, I will never be an enemy of the elves again, much less, be an enemy of the true god Avatar. The latter half of the sentence, he faced in Eve's direction, slightly lowering his head, with a respectful and submissive posture. Although not daring to look directly at this supreme being, there was a trace of supplication in his words. Eve said nothing. And El also said nothing. He looked back at the goddess, who gave him a slight smile. That smile was like spring, instantly warming El's heart, as if saying, "Do not worry about threats, everything is your decision." Then, Eve looked coldly at Blackstone. A mere half-orc warrior with silver strength couldn't bring out something that would catch the attention of the true god. If the avatar of the true god descended and couldn't take out the enemies all at once, that would mean she, as the true god, had no dignity. Eve's sense was still quite sharp. In her prediction, although killing Blackstone seemed to cause some ripples, it would not bring any danger. As her strength gradually recovered, her predictions also became more accurate, especially when it came to mundane creatures. And assured by the comforting gaze from the mother goddess, El's expression gradually became determined. He drew out his curved blade and, under Blackstone's terrified gaze, pierced it into his chest. "Sorry, you no longer have this chance." Amidst a harrowing wail, Blackstone's body began to rapidly age, and he struggled to look toward Eve, straining to open his eyes wide, tears of blood flowing, and he shouted, "Father God, will not spare you." "Absolutely, absolutely." Humph. Eve let out a soft snort. And Blackstone's body stiffened at that instant. Then, his body shattered like broken glass, crumbling, and turned into a pile of ash. All the half-orcs were completely annihilated. Eve waved her hand slightly, and a piece of bone flew up from the ground, landing in her palm. The forest was silent. All the players focused their gaze on that most dazzling, most sacred figure. They held their breath, their hearts filled with awe. Eve once again glanced around the scene, giving a slight smile to all the players. Each player who met her gaze felt a sense of closeness and reverence from that dreamlike smile, and then couldn't help but lower their heads again. And Eve turned around, faded into a brilliant light, and slowly disappeared. Ding! Task, Half-Beast Hunting Team, completed. All players who participated in the task, rewards will be settled according to your task contributions, granting corresponding experience points, contribution degrees, and perfect resurrection counts. Ding! All players who participated in the task receive the goddess's blessing Chosen 1. Chosen 1, in the next 7 in-game days, your experience gain will be increased by 50%. The players fell silent for a moment, then burst into a tremendous cheer. Chapter 80. Eve controlled her avatar and quickly left the players' battlefield under the cover of the holy light. After she distanced herself from the battlefield, she finally let out a sigh of relief. This appearance was a carefully considered decision of hers. When she issued the command to hunt down the half-beast team, she had a premonition that there would be some twists, and at that time, she planned to use her avatar as a backup plan. She didn't expect that she would really need to use it. Originally, she intended to wait until the players failed the mission. Once she discovered the half-beast's trump card, she would disguise herself as a follower of Hela to raid the half-beasts. This was absolutely not for the players' meager experience and contributions, but truly for the consideration of her own mysterious and secure feeling. However, upon hearing El's oath, her plan changed. She thought it might be an opportunity to change the indigenous elf clan's mindset in the Segis world. El's full name was El Moonlight. The Moonlight surname was very ancient among the elf clan, being a branch of the once elf kingdom royal family. After the decline of the elf kingdom and the extinction of the elf royal family, the Moonlight tribe became the most influential tribe among the elf clan. If she could recruit El, it would be easier for Eve to establish a banner among the native elves, quickly pulling them out of their foolish submissive kindness. Moreover, if done well, it could garner popularity among players. Don't underestimate this popularity. As a seasoned online gamer, Eve knew players very well. They held a special affection for faction leaders, especially when the leader was cool, handsome or beautiful, with a touching backstory, and could even offer players some benefits. Well, these players would definitely become devoted while playing the game. Although Elf Kingdom had her as the only faction leader, gaining more player fans would certainly make them more dedicated. She lacked nothing in terms of story backgrounds. And most of the quests were issued by her. As for appearance, not to brag, but, she had yet to find an existence surpassing her avatar. At this point, she just needed to brush up her presence appropriately. Why does this feel like she's on the path of becoming an idol? Eve shook her head. So, after thinking it over, she decided to take action herself. As for the dignity of a true god, she was just a dying weak divinity, what did she need dignity for? Besides, she wasn't a native true god, but someone from Blue Star who joined halfway. As long as it benefited her, she was willing to do anything, except for matters involving her bottom line. Besides, there were plenty of shameless divine on the Sedges continent. It's rumored that some even disguised as mortals to experience the human life, giving birth to several football teams of half-divine offspring. Of course, even if descending on sight, the true god's prestige must not drop. With Eve's current avatar, possessing strength just scraping lower gold, she needed to pay a certain price to maintain her impressive appearance in front of players. Especially since it was far from her main body and was not within her area of control. The array of flowers, green leaves, radiant brilliance, and ethereal sacred hymns were all effects she created by expending her divine power points. To achieve the best effect, her avatar almost exhausted its power. Although with the avatar's level, the special effects were just fragile illusions, they were enough to deceive the crowd. Additionally, the reason Eve entrusted finishing off to Elle was because maintaining the scene's special effects and controlling targets was already the limit for her avatar. If she had gone for the finishing blow, she might have inadvertently exposed herself. Fortunately, with her growing harmony with the World Tree, Eve's control over divine power became stronger, and her use of it more efficient than before. Healing everyone present only consumed 1 point of her divine power, much more efficient than spending 1 point to heal just 2 believers at the beginning. The reason healing consumed so much was partly due to the distance and partly because, unlike birthing a body from the World Tree which relied on its instincts, healing depended entirely on divine power. As for other glimmer effects and various control effects, they didn't even use up 1 point of divine power. And judging from the results, the effect was quite impressive. The half-beasts were awed, and the players were stunned. If player favorability could manifest physically, Eve believed it would surely skyrocket. Not only that, she also gained a new fanatical follower. A divine favored who willingly dedicated his entire body and soul to her. El's oath also meant he entrusted everything to the divine, becoming similar to the Oak Guardian. Such opportunities were rare, and it's difficult for someone to completely devote their body and soul to a true god, let alone someone with the qualifications to become a divine favored. As it happened, El, with a trace of royal blood, was capable of achieving this. Not only that, the time was still short, and El had not fully embraced the natural faith. Eve believed that as he grew, his faith would continue to strengthen, and he would eventually become a saint akin to Alice. With El's addition, Alice and Berserker can also offload some of the NPC tasks. Eve felt very satisfied. Retracting her avatar, Eve's consciousness returned to her main body. At this point, she began to review her gains. Unsurprisingly, this operation resulted in another surge of divine power. Eradicating the half-beasts brought a total of 8 points of divine power, mostly derived from the grievances of the elf souls. Becoming a divine favored and fanatical follower, El provided 1.5 points. Only 8 points from the half-beasts, it was somewhat unexpected for her. This time the number of half-beasts was far more than when Berserker acted the first time, and even included a silver lower, yet the divine power was only 3 points more than that time. However, soon Eve figured it out. The grievances of the elf souls are also limited. At the very beginning, the feedback is naturally more obvious, but as I grow stronger, these millennium-accumulated grievances become rarer and their effect on me weakens. However, Eve was not hoping to grow strong solely on petty grievances. As long as she could break out of the dying state, it was sufficient. She checked her divine power value. After deducting her expenditures and adding the sporadic gains during this period, she now had 94 points in total. Only 6 points away from shedding the dying state. At this moment, Eve took out the bone fragment she obtained from Blackstone. Unlike the World Tree leaf she gifted to Samir, which only had a one-time effect, this bone fragment could be used repeatedly. This meant it stored more divine power. Eve roughly sensed it. It had 10 points? She was astonished. After the initial joy, Eve decisively chose to devour it. 10 points of divine power were instantly extracted by her, crudely converted, and compressed into less than 7 points of natural divine power. And Eve's divine power finally broke through the 100-point mark. Chapter 81. Divine Power, 101/500. 100 points of divine power was the baseline to escape a near-death state. And when the divine power surpassed 100, Eve experienced an instinctive feeling she could reignite the vitality of the World Tree at any moment. The World Tree, in a near-death state, could not actively absorb energy from the outside world, but once revived, it would regain this instinct. Eve had been waiting too long for this moment. She did not hesitate, focused her attention, and began the revival. Under her thoughts, the 100 points of divine power started to deplete rapidly, and the divine space emitted a dazzling green light. The light continued to expand, eventually breaking through the space's limitations and radiating onto the entire World Tree. All the divine power poured out, flooding into the branches of the World Tree. The divine power split into two currents, one flowing upward, traveling from the trunk into the winding branches, then into the tips of the branches, constantly brewing, the other flowed downward, entering the root system, then delving deeply, gradually extending to the withered root tips. In an instant, an unprecedented feeling of relief spread throughout her body. Eve felt a strange tingle all over, as if something was breaking out. Finally, under the influence of divine power, this feeling reached its peak, seemingly breaking through a barrier, and waves of life began to surge continuously on the World Tree. In this instant, all players within the safety zone felt a touch of trepidation. Then, the ground seemed to begin to tremble faintly as if something was constantly rolling underground. Those were the roots of the World Tree, having regained vitality. The broken and withered root systems were starting to grow downward continuously. This phenomenon manifested on the ground, resulting in an effect akin to an earthquake. What's happening? An earthquake. Feeling the tremor of the ground, the players became alert. At this time, a player instinctively turned around and looked in the direction of the World Tree. His eyes widened abruptly, filled with disbelief, which soon transformed into excitement and awe. Look! The World Tree! The World Tree! Hearing his words, the other players also turned around. In an instant, their jaws dropped in amazement. The World Tree had transformed. The goddess had just revived, and the state of the World Tree was very poor, this was well known. Although players had seen the magnificent and grand scenery of the World Tree in the game's trailer, by the time they descended, the World Tree was no longer in its legendary form. Having endured thousands of years of divine wars, the originally lush and verdant World Tree was left with barren branches and a few withered leaves. More than that, even its entire body had shriveled and shrunk considerably compared to its full glory. The World Tree seen by the players was entirely on the verge of withering and dying. Even any traces of green were very scarce. But at this moment, the World Tree had changed. She began to reawaken with vitality. Looking far and wide, the towering trunk started to emit a magnificent glow. It was the radiance of nature and life. And at the tips of the branches, countless buds sprouted, then began to bud and unfurl at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, the previously sparse canopy was covered with countless tender green leaves. Although the leaves that sprouted were still sparse, the entire World Tree now exuded a hint of life, no longer resembling death and decay but seeming as if it were welcoming spring. As the World Tree budded and unfurled, strands of ancient and aged aura spread incessantly. Every player sensing this aura involuntarily trembled, feeling as though a bucket of cold water poured over them. Simultaneously, a primal reverence sprouted from within their hearts. It was the natural suppression of higher life forms over lower life forms. As the leaves unfurled, the pale green glow turned into countless freely flying divine photons, starting to spread outward with the World Tree at its center. Every player who came into contact with these photons felt a subtle and mysterious change within their bodies. They checked their status bars and were shocked to find that their constitution had improved to varying degrees, and their experience points had grown a little. Especially for players with the druid profession. Meanwhile, as the photons continued to spread, the plants in the forest began to grow rapidly, especially within the World Tree-centered safety zone. They seemed triggered by something, simultaneously budding and unfurling, constantly extending their branches. The areas once sparsely populated due to players' axes also saw young saplings sprout from the ground once again. Not only that but the saplings grew rapidly. In less than a minute, they had soared nearly 10 meters tall. In an instant, all places were covered in green once more. Even the elf town, developed by the players, was no exception. The wooden houses they constructed also burst with vitality, sprouting leaves. Moreover, some even bore flowers and fruits. However, the plants in the elf town seemed to follow some kind of directive. They regained vitality without destroying the original architectural structures but grew in line with the existing building style. Thus, rather than ruining the flavor of the original buildings, it added a touch of greenness and vigor. In no time, the entire town seemed like an ocean of flowers and greenery, bursting with vibrant life. In the sky, countless petals danced, resembling a kaleidoscope of flower rain. All the players were astonished. Whoa, my house has come to life! Haha, instant treehouse! It looks so beautiful! This is too spectacular! Has the world tree revived? Someone casually plucked a tempting red fruit from the eaves, brought it to their mouth, and took a bite. So sweet! After the rapid growth, all the plants within a 30-kilometer radius turned toward the world tree. They bent their branches and vines as if worshipping their monarch. All the players witnessing this scene were stunned by the sight of worshipping plants. All things worshipping. The visual impact of this was indescribable. At the center of all these changes, Eve also felt a profound transformation within herself. At the moment of budding and unfurling, her control over heaven and earth rapidly expanded, quickly extending from 10 kilometers to 30 kilometers. And after a complete revival, the divine power spent to activate her body began to be replenished, with Eve's divine power gradually rising. However, when it reached around 90 points, it stopped rising. Eve checked her status again. Name, Eve Yggdrasil. Race, World Tree, Ancient God. Level, 150, Mythical. Status, Weak Divine Power. Divine Roles, Nature, Life, Elves. Titles, Mother Nature, Goddess of Life, Ruler of Elves. Divine Power, 90/3000. Number of Believers, 222, Saint 1, Zealous Believers 3, Devout Believers 31, Faint Believers 187. Abilities, Absorption, Communication, Bestowal, Enlightenment, Healing, Summoning, Divine Descent. Absorption. Seeing a newly added ability, Eve's heart stirred. Chapter 82. Absorb. If Eve's judgment was correct, this was the traditional method by which the world tree gained energy. The world tree belonged to the ancient gods, and these gods possessed the ability to actively expand their own divine powers by absorbing void energy or other energy sources. And now, having escaped a near-death state, the ability Eve acquired was absorption. She focused her attention on her newly acquired ability, and the relevant information immediately surfaced in her mind. Absorption, the inherent ability of the world tree in its initial form, capable of absorbing void energy, origin power, and life essence from the void, planes, and creatures, transforming them into her own divine power. Indeed, it was an ability to gain divine power. Eve felt a burst of joy in her heart. However, looking at the details of this ability, she quickly grew curious again. Initial form of the world tree. Having been reincarnated as the world tree for so long, this was the first time she heard such a term. Even in the heritage she had received, there was no mention of it. Could there be other forms? What level was the last world tree? This inevitably led Eve to speculate. In its initial form, it was already an ancient god with weak divine power. If there were higher forms, what would they be like? Intermediate divine power? Great divine power? Or perhaps, something else? For a moment, Eve suddenly felt that she might have underestimated her new body. Then she noticed the several targets of absorption. Void, planes, creatures. The universe where the Yggdrasil world was located was different from Blue Star. Or rather, they did not belong to the same universe at all. The universe of Blue Star consisted of celestial bodies, the most common of which were stars, also known as the celestial universe. But the Yggdrasil world was not. The universe where the Yggdrasil world was located was a plane universe. The plane universe was composed of planes with different attributes. Each plane was a world sealed within its own bubble-like crystal sphere, and these crystal spheres floated in a kind of intangible, invisible special substance. In the Yggdrasil universe, this special substance was called the Void. The Yggdrasil world where Eve resided was the oldest high-level main material plane in the entire plane universe. The main material plane was the most balanced in attributes, highly developed in rules, and the most conducive to the birth of life among the various planes. It was said that the origin of life in the Yggdrasil universe was in the Yggdrasil world, the earliest civilization also originated from there, and the entire universe was thus named Yggdrasil. Reflecting on the origin of the Yggdrasil world and the description of the absorption ability, Eve suddenly felt a bit strange. The previous one being besieged by the gods, could it be related to this absorption ability? Absorbing energy from the void wasn't a big deal. This energy absorption was similar to that of the planes and void creatures, with no harm. However, absorbing from planes and creatures. Ahem, the origin of a plane was its fundamental power. If too much of its origin were lost, the plane would lower in rank, and in more severe cases, could even collapse. As for drawing life essence from creatures, to the gods, especially the faith-based gods who thrived on shepherding intelligent creatures, this was a potential threat. If the predecessor really intended to tap into the origin power of the Segis plane, or the lives in the Segis world 1,000 years ago, being besieged wouldn't be impossible. Only, if that were the case, the world tree would probably have long been portrayed by the gods as evil, but, as per Eve's observations and understanding, this wasn't so. Although the world tree had fallen, judging from the reaction of the half-beasts, the impression left by the world tree remained a revered ancient existence among living beings. Moreover, the elves, the race born of the world tree, still symbolized peace and nobility. It seems the secrets of the divine war 1,000 years ago run deep. Eve sighed. Getting nowhere with her thoughts, she decided to give absorption a try. Habitually predicting, finding no risks, Eve began to exercise the ability. And as she employed the absorption ability, her vision changed in an instant. She found her perception elevating continually, eventually breaking through the crystal sphere of the Segis plane, seeing the endless void. What's more, she could even see the void energy, which theoretically should have been invisible. This energy was like clusters of tiny light balls, executing orderly or disorderly movements in the void. Energy was being continually absorbed by the Segis plane, while new energy continued to form in the void. So this is void energy. Eve's heart stirred slightly, and she began to absorb it. With the thought, she suddenly felt countless tiny light clusters representing void energy beginning to fly towards the Segis plane. The number of these void energy clusters was vast. They quickly entered the Segis world, most of them sinking into the origin of the Segis plane, being absorbed by the plane, yet many crossed spatial boundaries straight into Eve's body. As the void energy entered, Eve felt a heated sensation all over her body, and her divine power value began to rise rapidly. 1 point, 2 points, 3 points. Her divine power continued to increase until it rose by a full 30 points, then gradually began to slow down. At this time, her energy absorption rate also slowed, seeming to return to a normal speed. Eve, feeling unsatisfied, focused on the void once more, discovering that she had absorbed all the void energy around her, and the remaining void energy had yet to spread from denser regions. Estimating about it, at her current rate of absorption, she could probably amass 1 unit of divine power every 10 days. What an amazing ability! If I keep this up, even if I do nothing, I could reach the level of weak divine power in about 80 years. Eve was very pleased. Having shed the near-death state, her maximum divine power capacity had now become 3,000. 3,000 divine power points was the highest that weak divine power could have. To go beyond, she would need to upgrade her divinity or control higher-level laws. However, the divinities that Eve possessed were already quite advanced. As soon as she restored a certain level of divine power, she could return to the corresponding rank. In other words, once she accumulated 3,000 divine power points, she could become a weak divine power. This was also why Euler went to great lengths to seize the divinities of nature and life. The reason being that the amount of divine power limited the level of a true god's strength, but the divinities limited the capacity of divine power of a true god. Absorption, truly is an extremely powerful ability. Eve was very satisfied. However, while she was being delighted with her absorption ability, the energy level of the entire Segis world suddenly changed. In Eve's perception, the magic level in the Segis plane increased at a speed visible to the naked eye. Within no time it was nearly 1% higher than before. Chapter 83. The magic level of Segis world has increased. Eve was first surprised, then her heart tightened. For thousands of years, the world tree's main body could exist steadily due to 2 factors. On one hand, the previous world tree had placed a barrier curse on its main body at the moment of its fall, making it so that no one but the elf clan and above the level of a true god could approach it. The other reason was that the magic level of Segis world had become increasingly low, insufficient to support the descent of a divine presence. The former had been broken when Eve was reborn, and as for the latter, it was now changing too. The rise in Segis world's magic level was definitely not a good sign for Eve at the moment. She felt a chill in her heart, but soon she understood the reason. It's the absorption. When Eve just absorbed the energy from the void, since her main body was rooted in the Segis plane, she had to operate through the plane. During this process, most of the void energy was actually absorbed by the origin of the Segis plane. Eve absorbed only a small portion. And in the Segis universe, the growth of a plane relied precisely on void energy. Eve's actions undoubtedly provided Segis plane with a nutritious boost, strengthening the plane's origin and naturally causing the overall magic level to rise. Understanding everything, Eve suddenly felt troubled. Because this meant that absorption became a double-edged sword, not only providing her with divine power but also allowing Segis World's magic level to recover. With the magic level recovery of Segis World, it might attract the attention of the Pantheon and even reopen the plane channels, allowing true gods to descend directly. If that happened, Eve would be in danger. Moreover, upon further observation, Eve discovered that her recent absorption seemed to have activated some mechanism within the Segis plane. Now, even if she stopped absorbing, the Segis plane's absorption of void energy had significantly increased. Not only that, but this increase was also accelerating at a slight pace. This meant that even if she ceased absorption, the plane channels of Segis World would eventually reopen. With a deep sigh, Eve started to calculate how long it would take for Segis World's magic to recover to the point where it could reopen the plane channels. If I stop absorbing, it's 100 years, but if I persist in absorbing, it's 20 years. A sense of urgency welled up in her heart. 20 years. Which meant that in at most 20 years, she had to grow to the point where she wouldn't fear an attack from the Pantheon. For a moment, Eve felt her scalp tingle. Even the previous strong world tree, with its powerful divine power, fell under the Pantheon's attack. How could she, a mere true god with weak divine power, rapidly grow in 20 years? This task was undeniably daunting. Is there any way to prevent the further strengthening of Segis World's plane origin? Eve pondered. Suddenly, she chuckled softly. How foolish, can't I just do it myself? The power of absorption could apply not just to the void but also to the plane. If worried about the plane recovering too fast, she could just absorb part of the plane's origin, couldn't she? After all, now in Segis World, she was the only conscious true god, all remaining true gods were in the heavenly realm. As long as she absorbed carefully, she wouldn't be discovered. Thinking of this, Eve decisively immersed herself in her consciousness and wielded absorption again. This time, she targeted the origin of the Segis plane. With the exercise of her ability, Eve's consciousness underwent a transformation. This time, her vision didn't elevate but descended. She saw her intertwined and tangled root system, saw the thick soil layer, saw the overlapping rock layers, and then saw the slow-flowing magma. Eventually, her vision sank to the deepest part of the plane, and she saw a resplendent, colorful mass. At this moment, Eve had a realization: this was the origin of the Segis plane. Taking a deep breath, Eve began to absorb. With her ability in play, the origin of the Segis plane immediately began to tremble, and strands of origin power started to cross the space toward Eve. Sensing the trembling of the origin, Eve was startled and quickly reduced her absorption, minimizing the influence on the plane's origin to avoid drawing attention from other existences. It had to be said, compared to the chaotic void energy, the power of plane origin seemed more gentle and pure. With just a small sip, Eve was delighted to find that her divine power value had instantly increased by 10 points. However, even before Eve could continue absorbing, a mysterious force inexplicably stopped her from further devouring. Suddenly, Eve was struck by an intuition, feeling an inexplicable call. This call was strange, and Eve couldn't perceive where it originated. It seemed to come from the void, yet appeared to be everywhere. However, this call didn't make her feel any threat. With a tinge of curiosity, Eve decided to accept this inexplicable call. At the moment she accepted the call, Eve's consciousness suddenly began to ascend rapidly, soon crossing the space. Her vision changed once more, starting with a blankness, then slowly returning to normal. At this moment, Eve was surprised to find herself back in human form. Furthermore, she discovered that this place was akin to a consciousness space, where she could freely alter her appearance and aura. Is this some place similar to a consciousness space? Eve had some speculations. And at this moment, the surrounding scene gradually became clear. Eve raised her head and found herself standing before a majestic temple. This temple was composed of gigantic white stone pillars, intricately carved with complex divine patterns, exuding an unparalleled solemnity and sanctity. The surroundings of the temple were an endless starry sky, with countless twinkling stars embracing the temple, adding a touch of mystery and nobility. This place was very similar to the legendary Heavenly Realm. But Eve was certain this was definitely not the Heavenly Realm, but more like a manifestation of an illusionary consciousness world. Eve perceived it carefully and raised an eyebrow. Has the scent of Segis world, is this, could it be a special space formed based on the plane's origin? At this point, Eve also understood what had stopped her from continuing to absorb the origin. It was likely this special space. When Eve looked up and saw the ancient Segis language inscription on top of the temple, she slightly raised her eyebrows. Pantheon. Eve felt a little curious. She first sensed that she could return to her main body at any time. After pondering for a moment, she decided to enter the temple and investigate. Before entering, she subtly altered her appearance, changing her hair and eye color to black, making her face unrecognizable, and modified her divine power aura. Once everything was ready, Eve pushed open the temple doors. Chapter 84. Accompanied by the sound of creak, creak, the grand doors of the temple slowly opened. Eve took a deep breath, raising her guard to the utmost as she cautiously stepped inside. Upon entering the Pantheon, Eve found herself in an immensely vast hall. After arriving here, Eve was surprised to find that her powers seemed to be somehow limited. She couldn't extend her divine sense and had to rely solely on her eyes to observe everything, seemingly reverting to a mortal in an instant. Fortunately, Eve felt that her connection with the World Tree's body still existed, and she could return if she wished. Once she ensured her safety, Eve began to observe the hall. The place was vast, like a gigantic conference hall, filled with luxurious and imposing thrones. There were numerous thrones, arranged in a fan shape, numbering at least 1,000. Each throne was different, boasting its own unique style and patterns. However, if one looked closely, they would find that the vast majority of the thrones were dim and dull. Many were even somewhat broken and damaged, only a few sparkled under the starlight, brilliantly magnificent. All of these intact thrones were concentrated at the front of the temple, and there were fewer than 100 of them. Seeing all this, Eve had a sudden realization. The Pantheon. I see, could this be that place? Looking at the thrones before her and combining the knowledge from her World Tree legacy, she finally understood where this was. In the legacy she acquired from the World Tree, there was a supreme temple in the heavenly realm. The supreme temple symbolized the true God's dominion and status. It was also where the divine council took place. The temple was filled with thrones, each belonging to a true God born since life first appeared in the Segis universe. However, according to the World Tree's legacy, that supreme temple had already been destroyed in a divine war a millennium ago. Thinking of this, Eve shook her head. No, this shouldn't be that supreme temple, otherwise there wouldn't be the aura of the Segis world here. But, these thrones are exactly the same as the true God's thrones mentioned in the World Tree legacy, as if they were moved from the supreme temple. Could the Pantheon be a substitute for the supreme temple? However, the supreme temple was originally located in the heavenly realm, so how is this so-called Pantheon connected to the Segis plane? Eve felt a bit puzzled in her heart. After some exploration, she was now certain that this special space was definitely located within the Segis plane. As for the specific location, it was likely near the source of the Segis plane and its crystalline wall. This feeling was very bizarre, like it's meant to suppress something. Eve speculated in her heart. The true God thrones in the Supreme Temple were imbued with the blessing of laws. Even if a true God fell, the remaining throne would still be a precious divine artifact. Although it was a divine artifact with no special abilities, the might of the true God lingered, naturally possessing the characteristic of suppressing all things. At this moment, Eve also understood what was preventing her from absorbing the source of the Segis plane. It was precisely this Pantheon. Is it to suppress the source of the Segis world? Eve's heart was stirred. But soon, she shook her head again. No, it's not exactly suppression, it's more like protection. No, it is both suppression and protection. Linking to some information from the World Tree legacy, Eve had some guesses. In the legacy, it was recorded that in the Divine War 1,000 years ago, not only was the World Tree heavily damaged. The Heavenly Realm and the Segis Plane were both battlefields of the gods. The damage to the Heavenly Realm resulted in the collapse of the Supreme Temple, while the Segis world's source was damaged, drastically lowering the level of magic power. Thinking of this, Eve already had some ideas in her heart. Here, it should be a new meeting place rebuilt by the gods who moved the gods' thrones from the Heavenly Realm, allowing only consciousness to descend. Moreover, it also has the effect of both protecting and suppressing the source of the Segis plane. The Segis Plain was the largest main material world and the one with the most intelligent creatures providing faith. For the true gods to set up a new meeting place here to protect the world wasn't impossible. Even though they couldn't descend with their true forms into the Segis world, they could still descend as consciousness here. Thinking of this, Eve felt a bit of lingering fear. My previous absorption was really reckless. If there had been a true god's consciousness here at that time, my existence might have been discovered. Her first attempt at absorption had a truly terrifying effect. The source of the Segis plane had been damaged, absorbing void energy very slowly for a millennium. And void energy naturally had a tendency to draw near to planes. In 1,000 years, the amount of accumulated void energy around the Segis plane wasn't small. With one draw from Eve, the accumulated 1,000-year void energy rushed in all at once, instantly raising the magic level of the Segis world by nearly 1%. If there had been a true god's consciousness present at that time, it would certainly have been discovered long ago. Though they wouldn't necessarily guess the revival of the world tree, they would definitely suspect something within Segis. No, wait. Suddenly, Eve's heart stirred. She looked at the numerous thrones, searching one by one. Moments later, her expression turned odd. No, the gods should not be able to guess the revival of the world tree. More accurately, they certainly wouldn't. Her gaze focused on one of the dilapidated thrones among the many broken ones. It was a throne engraved with exquisite and intricate patterns, adorned with flowers and vines, identical to the world tree's throne in the legacy Eve received. The throne retained a wisp of the true god's divine soul mark. A dilapidated throne indicated the fall of a true god. Although Eve inherited the legacy of the world tree, possessing the same divinity, she was ultimately not the former world tree. Her soul originated from another universe, distinct in its divine soul. Therefore, she did not inherit the former's throne. In other words, while the world tree had revived, its registered identity in the pantheon remained dead. Compared to the former world tree, Eve was more like its child. Thinking of this, Eve felt a bit amused, yet immensely grateful. But soon, she realized this was also a great opportunity. This meant that as long as she didn't reveal herself, even if the gods noticed the change in the Segis world's magic power, they wouldn't suspect the world tree in the short term. Just then, Eve suddenly felt that inexplicable summon again. But this time, a clarity arose within her heart. I see, is this summoning asking me to leave my divine soul mark here? Leaving a divine soul mark would give rise to a new throne in the pantheon, and it would also signify Eve's acceptance among the gods. In other words, a new god being registered. However, Eve decided to forego this. The throne is manifested through divine power. Even if I conceal my divine power aura, leaving a throne would be a dead giveaway. Worse, it might directly resonate with the former world tree's throne, causing a direct inheritance of the previous throne. That would be awkward, directly exposing herself. It's better not to register. If I could have a new divine role, I might consider leaving an alias. Eve shook her head, sighed regretfully, and turned to leave the pantheon. Not long after she departed, several thrones within the pantheon suddenly erupted in brilliant radiance. Chapter 85. A brilliant holy light descended in the pantheon, and 3 majestic figures appeared within the temple. They sat on their divine thrones, faces obscured, enveloped in dazzling holy light. One figure was gold, with what seemed like countless angels of faith singing behind her, and many living beings prostrating in worship. Another was bright grey, with what appeared to be innumerable shadowy figures roaring behind her, faint sounds of war swords clashing echoing in the distance. The last one was silver blue, surrounded by countless brilliant starlight, peaceful yet mysterious. The entire pantheon resonated with ethereal hymns, the glow of divine power rendering the great hall incomparably sacred and magnificent. Suddenly, the golden figure spoke, her voice deep and commanding. A strange aura of divine power passed by. However, midway through, her voice took on a tone of surprise. Hey? I can't perceive the attributes of her divine power. Upon hearing her words, the bright grey figure scanned the surroundings, saying somewhat puzzled. No new divine thrones. Her voice was ancient and hoarse. After a brief silence, the golden figure spoke again. It's a new god, but she chose not to leave a divine power seal. After speaking, she looked toward the silver blue figure. Lord Rigdar, within this century, who was the true god on duty in the pantheon? Why wasn't the guidance for the newborn deity prepared? The silver blue figure paused for a moment, then looked at the bright grey figure and said. It was the god of winter and hunting Uller. After hearing his words, the golden figure immediately turned to look at the bright grey figure, her voice tinged with displeasure. Lord, Euler is your subordinate deity, this is your negligence. The bright grey figure was silent for a moment, then sighed. I will punish her, Lord Yggdrasil. The golden figure nodded, then suddenly let out a snort of laughter. Euler, still contemplating taking over her divine role. The bright grey figure known as Lord nodded. Her divine role aligns very well with Euler. Although I have warned her many times, I'm afraid she hasn't given up. Nature and life. The golden figure turned and looked at a dim divine throne in the back. Her gaze focused on a throne engraved with flowers and vines, her voice carrying a hint of wariness. It's been 1,000 years, and I don't know if the curse and divine arts she set still exist. Ahem. At this moment, the silver blue figure lightly coughed twice. Her voice held a hint of dissatisfaction. Lord Yggdrasil, you should remember our agreement from 1,000 years ago, she has already fallen, and what Segis world currently needs is recuperation and rest. With the current energy level of Segis world, it can't support our descent, and its plane source cannot withstand major disruptions. As for her body, I've said many times, her ties with the Segis plane are too deep, and before the Segis plane source recovers, the gods can't take action against it, unless... Her tone turned slightly mocking. Do you wish to see the Segis world collapse? Humph. The golden figure snorted coldly, saying nothing more. But moments later, she let out a soft exclamation. Hey? The magic power of Segis world has increased. The silver blue figure nodded. It has increased. It's been 1,000 years, although faster than my prophecy, the Segis plane has indeed reached the time of source recovery. The golden figure remained silent for a moment, then looked again at the silver blue figure. Lord Rigdar, I don't know what plans you ultimately have, but our agreement from 1,000 years ago will not change. After speaking, she stood up from her divine throne, her voice low and powerful. All existences that threaten the gods must be completely obliterated. Then, she spoke once more to the bright grey figure. Lord, please inform Euler to quickly locate the newborn true god and guide her into the pantheon. After speaking, her figure began to shine brilliantly, and then her entire form slowly disappeared. Meanwhile, the other two figures looked at each other and also returned. The pantheon returned to tranquility once more. Heavenly Realm. In a small divine country about 10 million square kilometers in size, countless prayers fervently prayed. At the center of the divine country stood a majestic snowy mountain, perpetually covered in snow, atop which was a silver temple. Inside the temple, a towering figure shrouded in holy light was toying with an exquisite divine bow. Suddenly, she felt a stirring in her heart and reached out her hand with a beckoning gesture. A silver ball of light flew into her hand, and upon touching it, an angry roar echoed throughout the temple. Euler! A true god has been born. This century, you are on duty in the pantheon. Quickly locate the newborn true god and guide her into the pantheon. Furthermore, for your dereliction of duty, your tenure will be extended by another century as punishment. Euler! Taking a deep breath, she stood up from her divine throne, bowing slightly in a certain direction. I will obey the main god's oracle. Upon hearing her words, the silver ball of light seemed satisfied, disappearing slowly. Euler let out a sigh of relief, saying somewhat regretfully. I didn't expect a true god to be born. The Segis universe hadn't seen a new true god in 1,000 years, so she had relaxed on her duties, only to be caught off guard. Seemingly thinking of something, Euler looked toward the direction the light ball had come from, letting out a dissatisfied snort. Humph! If I possessed nature and life, would I still be sub-god? As the youngest and most promising, self-proclaimed, newborn true god in thousands of years, she had always hoped to become independent, to have her own divine system, but sadly the half-beast clan was too weak, and her divine role too insignificant. I wonder how those believers are doing with their investigations. Somehow, there has been no news all this time. Euler put down her divine bow, pacing impatiently within the temple. Suddenly, she felt a stirring in her heart. She stopped and lightly beckoned outside the temple. Soon, a frail half-beast soul floated over. It was an elderly half-beast, draped in sheepskin, a priest. If Dima were present, he would recognize him as the unlucky one killed by a lunchbox stabbing. Euler narrowed her eyes and then placed her hand on the head of the priest's soul. Instantly, scenes played out within the temple. They were the life experiences of the priest. The priest was different from other believers. Upon becoming a priest, a sentient being effectively laid bare their soul to the true God. In such a case, once a wise being died, their memories would be protected by the true God's divine power, and their soul, upon ascending to the divine country, would still retain their memories from life. Moreover, the true God could also read their memories. This was the real reason Eve had to guard against Ylur's priests. As she read through the memories, Ylur's expression shifted from anticipation to severity, then from severity to perplexity. Moments later, she withdrew her hand, muttering in bewilderment. 7 Dragon Balls? Mangeki Sharingan? Pirate King's Treasure. Chapter 86. The core area of the elf forest. A team of elves, wearing splendid armor and magic robes, lay in ambush in the jungle. Through the thick foliage, they watched a giant beast in the distance with vigilance. It was a demon beast of the sub-dragon species, covered entirely in scale armor, approximately 4 to 5 meters tall. It was hunched over, gnawing on a wild boar carcass, occasionally letting out low hissing sounds. This beast was known as the forest giant lizard, rumored to possess a trace of green dragon blood, capable of spewing a highly corrosive venom mist, a bona fide silver lower early stage demon beast. Demasha, with a serious expression, looked at this forest giant lizard and whispered to the young elf beside him. "El, do you see that giant lizard?" El nodded, his expression focused like a good child paying attention in class. "I see it, brother Demasha." At this moment, the young elf was quite different from before. He wore equally magnificent armor and held a gleaming short sword. That was the goddess's gift to him, a symbol of the divine favored. According to Demasha, this equipment was truly of legendary golden status, making all the chosen ones envious. Though El didn't quite understand what golden legend meant, he knew this equipment was incredibly precious. This made him even more grateful and reverent to the generous mother goddess. Looking at the earnest young elf, Demasha was quite satisfied. He cleared his throat and spoke with earnest words. "El, though you've significantly increased in strength, you still need training. Just as the goddess said, for the elf clan to become strong again, it requires not just a sincere heart but also the cultivation of a fighting spirit. The struggle among races is cruel, and unbounded mercy only puts oneself in danger. Though you've increased in strength, you still lack fighting experience. This demon beast has a silver lower rank, not only is it ugly, but it's also a cruel carnivore, absolutely heinous. Why don't we, it's just right for you to practice. I know you'll still feel some reluctance, but there's no need to rush. We'll take it slow, just like before, you beat it half dead, and we'll handle the rest." Demasha's expression was gentle, guiding patiently. Hearing his words, El nodded obediently. "Okay, brother Demasha." Though he had killed half-beast with his own hands, the innate kindness of the elves still made him reluctant to strike at these demon beasts. Thinking of this, El looked at Demasha with a bit of admiration, a warmth rising in his heart. Brother Demasha took the risk to find these powerful demon beasts for my growth, and considering my psychological endurance, even allowed me to first knock the demon beast half dead while they handled the rest. They're really great. I must not let him down. His expression gradually became determined. Taking a deep breath, El said. "Brother Demasha, I'm going." Demasha nodded as well. "Go ahead, be safe, the goddess will bless you." He drew a symbol of Mother Nature on his chest, his expression solemn and devout. After saying this, he couldn't help but add. "Just beat it half dead." El quickly approached the giant lizard and engaged in battle with it. The intensity of the silver rank battle waves astonished the lurking players who watched in awe. Yet as the battle commenced, Demasha's serious expression immediately faltered. He smirked slightly, his eyes glowing as he looked at the distant giant lizard. "Silver lower, he, taking this kill is probably worth several thousand experience points again." Li Mu walked up beside him and gave him a helpless glance. "You, taking advantage of kids' opportunities." Hearing Li Mu's words, Demasha grinned. "Brother Mu, El isn't a kid anymore, he's older than my great-grandfather." Saying this, he rolled his eyes and chuckled. "Besides, I did nothing wrong. He trained his combat skills, and we stepped in for some experience points, it's a win-win." Li Mu rolled his eyes. "You're just tempted by his silver lower peak strength. Hehe, a silver hand, why not take advantage of it?" Demasha laughed. "If El knew your true intentions, the little goodwill you have might just turn negative." Li Mu shook his head. "No worries, we've been through the clink together. I've told him many stories, too. Dimasha patted his chest proudly. After speaking, his expression turned somewhat mysterious as he leaned toward Li Mu's ear. Did you know? Elle's favorite story is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, although it's my emotionally revised tragedy version. Li Mu. Seeing Li Mu not replying, Dimasha chuckled awkwardly and changed the topic. Speaking of which, it seems like there are more demon beasts in the forest recently, weren't they all gone before? Due to the players hunting, the low-level demon beasts in the core area of the elf forest had long begun migrating on a large scale for their lives. But ever since the World Tree's resurgence, players were surprised to find these demon beasts gradually returning. Not only that, even some higher-level demon beasts began migrating to the core area. Li Mu looked at the surrounding jungles, which were lusher than before, and said uncertainly. It might be due to the resurgence of magic power. I'm a druid, and my perception of magic power in the forest is still strong. After the World Tree's resurgence, there's been a significant increase in magic power in the forest, especially in the core area. These demon beasts might be migrating because of this. Not to mention them, even I feel like the effects of meditation have improved a lot recently. The world of Segis was a fantastical place, areas rich in magic power were often abundant in resources as well. Especially here in the forest, representing plentiful natural magic power, it's no surprise the demon beasts were drawn to it. Hearing Li Mu's words, Dimasha licked his lips. Looks like we'll have more game to eat soon. Li Mu. The battle quickly concluded. Moments later, Elle returned to the players' team, wiping the blood off his short sword, giving a slight nod to Dimasha. Brother Dimasha, I finished. So fast. Dimasha blinked in surprise, then looked over at the giant lizard. At this moment, the giant lizard had already collapsed on the ground, barely clinging to life. Its body was covered in wounds, scales scattered everywhere, a pitiful sight, with only its legs twitching. Dimasha. Such a fierce old young man. He gave a peculiar glance at the innocent-faced Elle, then chuckled awkwardly. Ahem, well, nicely done. Afterward, he signaled to the other players with his eyes, and a group excitedly swung their weapons, rushing at the fallen giant lizard. Following closely behind NPCs meant good rewards. Watching the chosen ones excitedly rush toward the demon beast, Elle was no longer surprised. Once the players dealt with the demon beast and sacrificially offered materials like scales and beast bones to the goddess, they marched back to the elf town. And as soon as they returned to the town, a cuckoo bird found Li Mu and his group. Miss Alice has something for EL. The bird seemed quite excited, almost breaking her generally stern and aloof persona. What is it? Li Mu asked curiously. It seems, members of the elf clan are returning. Chapter 87. After receiving Alice's summons, Elle and Dimasha exchanged greetings with others and immediately returned to the natural temple. During this time, the natural temple had been expanded once again. Originally, there was only one main hall in the temple, but now several branch halls had been opened, allegedly to accommodate future priests. Players were always curious about what future priests meant. After all, in the magic classes of the players, the priest role hadn't been unlocked. But now, everyone finally knew. Members of the elf clan were returning. In other words, Elf Forest was about to welcome a new batch of NPCs. And this, probably meant a new main storyline. Many players who received the news put down their work and rushed from all directions, adeptly eavesdropping on the temple's walls. Inside the natural temple, Alice was imparting the teachings of Mother Nature to two little elven girls. They were Elle's sisters, one named Li Yu Guang, the other, Rhea Moonlight. However, although they were called sisters, they actually had no blood relation to Elle. The birth rate of the elf clan was very low. Usually, young elves of the same age were raised together and referred to each other as siblings. And the three of them, Elle, Li, and Rhea, were the last descendants of the Moonlight tribe. Unlike Elle, who had already become a divine favored, Li and Rhea were younger, not even 60 years old, and were in the prime of learning knowledge. Alice hoped to train them to become the future natural priests. When Elle entered the temple, the two little girls, like sticky rice balls, were focused intently on Alice's lecture on the natural canon. When they saw Elle, their eyes lit up, and Alice also set down the heavy scriptures, smiling slightly at them. Let's stop here for today. You two may leave first. I have something to discuss with your brother El. The two little girls cheered, stood up, bowed to Alice, and said sweetly. Okay, Teacher Alice. Afterward, they pounced on Elle like butterflies. Brother Elle. Welcome back. Elle smiled at them, gently patting their little heads. Don't play too wildly. Also, don't always stick with the chosen ones, and don't listen to some of their twisted logic or eat things you shouldn't. Alice added. Hearing Alice's words, the two little girls shrank their heads. They withdrew 2 sticks of wood that were about to peek out from their bosoms, swallowed a gulp, and chuckled at Alice. Then, they ran out of the temple like the wind. After they left, Alice looked at Elle and drew a tree-shaped symbol on her chest. May the Mother Goddess bless you, Lord El. Elle returned the gesture respectfully. May the Mother Goddess bless you, Lord Alice. Alice noted the bloodstains on Elle and her expression slightly stiffened. Did you go hunting demon beasts with the chosen ones again? Elle nodded, his expression solemn. Mercy won't save the elf clan. The honing of blade and blood is necessary. Alice. She gave Elle a complicated glance and sighed. Oh well, maybe, your choice is a path as well. The Mother Goddess had expressed tacit approval of the chosen one's actions and even allowed Elle to mingle with them every day. This made Alice, as the natural saintess, begin to suspect. Perhaps, the Mother Goddess truly wanted to change the nature of the elf clan. Having witnessed too much of the blood and tears of the elf clan and seeing Elf Town prosper under the efforts of the chosen ones, Alice found her original convictions gradually wavering. But no matter what, the Mother Goddess was always right. All she had to do was follow her will, and she would surely witness the glory of the elf clan once more. Thinking of this, Alice's faith became even more resolute. She took a deep breath, her expression gradually becoming devout and serious, and said to Elle. Lord Elle, the Mother Goddess has conveyed another oracle to me. As she spoke, a glimmer appeared in her eyes. Our elf clan's flame tribe will soon return to Elf Forest. The flame tribe? That's great. Elle's eyes brightened. He had also heard from his grandfather that the flame tribe was a relatively populous tribe. Alice nodded, her expression serious. However, the flame tribe, being large in number, must cross the border between the Dark Mountain Range and Elf Forest to return. Based on the location of the half-beast outpost we previously destroyed, I suspect there's a half-beast tribe in that area. A half-beast tribe? Elle's expression gradually turned serious as well. So, for the safe return of the flame tribe, I hope you can go and assist them. Alice said. Although Samir, the old priest, possessed silver-level power, a priest's combat ability was ultimately lacking, with more emphasis on support tasks. And the world tree leaf he wielded could only perform 1 golden-level defensive divine art at most. To be safe, Alice still wished for Elle, who had become a combat-based divine favored, to make the journey. As for why not choose the Oak Guardian Berserker? Berserker's presence was too prominent and too unique, his appearance was almost an immediate announcement of the world tree's revival. While priests and divine favored could at least disguise a bit in front of other true gods believers. Of course, this was also under Eve's direction. After touring the Pantheon, she believed that as long as the world tree divine throne in the Pantheon was still damaged, even if natural believers appeared, the true gods would at most suspect that someone inherited the world tree's natural god position. Who would think of an otherworldly soul traveling into the world tree to inherit it? According to Eve's speculation, the reason the world tree attracted the siege of the gods was probably not because of the divine position but perhaps due to the world tree itself, likely related to the power of absorption. Of course, the natural and life-related divine positions themselves belong to advanced divine positions, alluring enough to some ordinary demigods and true gods. If truly exposed, it could actually be a double-edged sword, it might attract some unfortunate targets. Eve, although possessing the power of absorption, found this ability had too many limitations. If she wished to rise rapidly, it was necessary to both strengthen the elf clan and rely on players' sacrificial war offerings to contribute vitally, while finding ways to consume some legendary creatures or demigod corpses. If she could attract some unlucky targets through the divine position, it might be worthwhile. Eve had emerged from a near-death state and now had some confidence. In the region under her control, she was the sovereign. Additionally, you can select some outstanding chosen ones to accompany you. The chosen ones are immortal entities with extensive combat experience and can become your powerful assistants. Alice added. After Eve emerged from a near-death state, the area she controlled expanded threefold, and the range in which players could operate also expanded threefold. Reaching the border area of Elf Forest and the dark mountain range was now achievable. After listening to Alice, Elle nodded. I understand. Then, I wish you a safe journey. Alice bowed her head slightly, saluting Elle once more, and Elle respectfully returned the gesture. Rest assured, Lord Alice, I will ensure the Flame Clan returns home safely. With that, he turned and left the temple. Chapter 88. Elle left the temple and walked into the town. The elf town was now larger in scale than before. This was due to the continuous construction by the players. Construction tasks had always been present and were the most common daily tasks in the Elf Kingdom. As the number of players increased, everyone's roles became more refined. This wasn't something Eve intentionally did, but rather it was spontaneously organized by the players. Humans were inherently social creatures with a strong group and division of labor consciousness. After adapting to the rhythm of the Elf Kingdom, this trend became increasingly apparent. In particular, the arrival of second test players further supplemented the labor force, and a nascent order of division had subtly formed among the players. For example, in construction work, architectural design was almost entirely handled by the elf construction team of the Meng Meng Committee Guild, marking them as well-off white-collars. The actual construction was done by some players who had mastered magic and special skills, considered to be grey-collar technicians. As for the less skilled second test players, they could only choose to collect construction materials daily. It was the most arduous, the bottom-tier blue-collar work. Not only that, but the players' ingenious methods of making money were gradually emerging. The Meng Meng Committee launched a free DIY real estate project. As long as you contributed enough, they could even build a splendid palace for you according to your dreams. Of course, to date, only the guild leader, Little Xian Miao, had achieved this. Her luxurious vacation manor, built in the southwest of Elf Town, was near completion. Meanwhile, the First Legion Guild started a task of taking second test players under their wing. With money, you could team up with Black Iron level top players to farm monsters in the wild. They would beat the monsters within an inch of their lives, and you only needed to finish them off to gain experience. Moreover, some players focused on life skills began opening various shops in town, with food services being the most common. After all, most players still enjoyed wandering around the game. Although food was relatively easy to find in the Elf Forest, it still required time to gather. Seeing this, some players discovered a business opportunity and opened shops to sell berries directly. Moreover, players with good culinary skills ventured into the catering business, further processing collected ingredients and opening small restaurants with quite good business. Especially a few guys from the northeast covertly running underground barbecue operations, unbeknownst to Alice. Additionally, some first-wave players went so far as to rent out their empty rooms, providing lodging for second test players who couldn't afford to build houses and were unwilling to log off in the mortuary. This ingenious approach made second test players exclaim, "Why is the gap between people so wide even in the game?" It was just that realistic. Yet, despite this, the second test players were still painfully joyful. Everyone diligently ground out tasks, accumulating experience and contribution points, striving to gain stronger power, better skills and better equipment, like hard-working little bees. At times, Eve pondered whether, if everyone on Blue Star had a system that showed visible numbers, people would become just as hard-working. In reality, everyone only lacked a visible goal and direction. As for players with stronger powers, the most rewarding, rich, and anticipated activity was none other than the storyline quests. Unlike other games, the storyline quests in Elf Kingdom were unique occurrences. The quests truly propelled the story's development, creating a strong sense of epicness and participation, easily fostering a sense of belonging and winning unanimous praise from the players. And the moment Elle left the temple, all players received a new system message. Main quest, the return of the Flame Tribe. Quest description, the Flame Tribe is an ancient branch of the Elf clan. After enduring a millennium of hardships, they have finally chosen to return home. Now, it is time to welcome them. Quest objective, follow the divine favored Elle, protect each Flame Tribe elf, and guide them safely back home. Quest time limit, unlimited. Quest players, unlimited. Quest level, 11+. Quest rewards, experience points, perfect resurrection, contribution points. Seeing the system message, players became excited once again. As soon as Elle emerged, he was immediately surrounded by players. Elle. Is there a new quest? A mission to guide the tribe members back? Be sure to include me. I have tons of combat experience. My dear. I just learned a new fire-based spell, and the power of the fireball I've conjured is enormous. Every player encircled him, their eyes gleaming. Seeing those expectant eyes filled with enthusiasm and those lively, energetic smiles, El felt very moved. Thinking of his former tribe, his eyes grew a bit moist. If his tribe had such fearless, battle-ready warriors, would the tragedy have unfolded? These special tribe members called Chosen Ones by the Holy Daughter, were truly selfless, kind, and great. El looked around, his eyes slightly red. He said excitedly. Yes, I am going to the edge of the elf forest to guide some tribe members home. I need some assistance. After saying that, he paused, his expression serious. This time, we might encounter half-beasts. The risk is quite significant, so everyone must carefully consider. Once confirmed, the players became even more excited. Risk? Risk is my middle name. Risk and opportunity go hand in hand. Lord L. Be sure to include me. Finally, a quest. I've barely made it to level 11, and I haven't done a storyline quest yet. And me too. I'm almost level 14. Their expressions were excited, as if they were talking not about a dangerous action but an amusing game. Watching Chosen Ones eagerly signing up, El felt even more moved. No rush. No rush. We all go together. Together. The righteous boy's chest was filled with courage. Rock Cave Tribe. The giant mountain priest paced back and forth in the cave, seemingly in a bad mood. He glanced at the stone calendar he used for timekeeping, his face heavy with concern. It's been so many days, why is there still no news from Blackstone? The deadline he had set for Blackstone's return had already passed, yet there was no sign of him. Blackstone had always been reliable, and such an occurrence was unusual for someone as cautious and punctual as him. Not only that, but the half-beast team dispatched by the giant mountain had also vanished without a trace, as if all contact had been lost. All of this made the old priest increasingly anxious, and even a bit suspicious. Could it be that something really happened in the elf forest? He had entrusted Blackstone with a precious divine artifact for protection. By right, it should have been more than enough for Blackstone to sweep through the core area of the elf forest. Surely they didn't really encounter some high-ranking presence. The giant mountain was restless. As he hesitated about whether to send more people to investigate, a half-beast scout entered the cave. Priest. Priest. His voice was filled with excitement. The giant mountain frowned, somewhat irritatedly asking. What is it? The half-beast saluted him, his voice filled with excitement. Our people discovered a large migration of elves nearby. It seems to be a tribe. Chapter 89. The Elf Tribe. Jushin was slightly taken aback, feeling quite surprised. The Rock Cave tribe thrived on trading elves, and discovering a large number of elves near the tribe was undoubtedly a treasure delivered right to their doorstep. However, being of an older age, Jushin thought of more. He wasn't as excited as the half-beast who reported the news, instead, he was calm and puzzled. Elves? How could they appear here? Currently, aside from those stubborn ones still believing in the return of the World Tree, there were hardly any elves left in the elf forest. Due to the presence of hunting teams, the elves were almost all uprooted, wandering and hiding all over the continent. And under these circumstances, how could there be so many elves appearing nearby? Migrating? Would they still migrate to the elf forest? In Jushin's view, losing the divine's protection and bearing the burden of the curse of downgrading, doing so was nothing short of seeking death for the elves. Surely the elves wouldn't seek death, unless there was a reason compelling them to migrate. Jushin's eyes flashed, suddenly associating it with the investigative task about the elf forest issued by the Father God. In an instant, he felt his eyelid twitch. Could it be that the World Tree has revived? He couldn't help but glance towards the direction of the elf forest, his expression turning solemn. But soon, he shook his head again. Impossible, if the World Tree revived, the Segis world would have been in turmoil by now. Jushin turned around, looking towards the murals in the cave. The torch on the cave wall cast flickering shadows over his expression. As the only half-beast priest from the Rock Cave tribe to have undergone the sacred land's baptism in 1,000 years, and one with the potential to ascend to sainthood after death, he knew quite a bit about the secrets of the gods. If the World Tree had revived, the gods would have known long ago, and the Father God would have issued a divine oracle in advance. Recalling once again the strange elf in the oracle and the disappearance of people like Blackstone, Jushin's expression gradually grew serious. However, there seems to truly be an unknown force protecting the elf clan. The elves' migration might also be related to this. Considering the oracle and the disappearance of Blackstone and others, Jushin had a few guesses. Perhaps, it really was the forces of the death god causing havoc behind the scenes. After all, though the father god possessed only weak divine power, a powerful pantheon backed him. The father god's ambition for the divine duty of the world tree was unyielding. Looking over the forces opposing the father god and possibly coveting the divine duties of nature and life, it seemed as if only that one from the netherworld remained. However, even if the death god's forces were the ones causing trouble behind the scenes, as a believer of the god of winter and hunting, and an enemy of the elf clan, Jushin couldn't simply let the elf clan pass. Moreover, Jushin's eyes flashed again. If things were indeed as he guessed, perhaps he could extract the secret of the elf forest from these elves. Even Blackstone, carrying a relic, had disappeared, and Jushin was starting to feel fearful. He didn't want to send more people into the elf forest. To him, the current elf forest was filled with danger. Thinking of this, Jushin turned around once more and gazed at a scout. "How many of them are there?" The scout respectfully replied. "Approximately over 200 people, consisting of both young and old. Their strength is not formidable, most are black iron lower, though some elders are black iron upper." After hearing the scout's report, Jushin nodded. For the Rock Cave tribe, such strength was like food being delivered to their door. Of course, this didn't exclude the possibility of hidden strength within the elf tribe, but in Jushin's view, the probability was too small. If concerned, they could just allocate more manpower. If things went south, they could even request assistance from the tribe's esteemed individual. Once they captured these elves and uncovered the secret of their migration, they could turn around and sell them off. More than 200 elves. If this deal succeeded, even if they abandoned their home in the dark mountain range and migrated afar, the Rock Cave tribe would still have confidence. The elf forest must have undergone some changes. If too dangerous, Jushin might even consider moving the tribe. Yet doing so might disappoint the father god, so unless absolutely necessary, Jushin wouldn't choose to lead his tribe away. The truth would be revealed once they intercepted the elves. Thinking of this, Jushin's eyes flashed once more. He turned his head towards another half-beast priest who served nearby. "How much longer until the human caravan arrives?" the questioned half-beast priest replied. "According to usual time frames, it should be another half a month to a month." Jushin pondered for a moment and said. "First, send people to monitor those elves. Also, mobilize the tribes young and strong, we'll circle ahead of them and prepare an ambush." After speaking, he hesitated, then gritted his teeth and said. "Additionally, to be safe, prepare meat for 100 people and deliver it to the mine at the back of the tribe's mountain." Upon hearing Jushin's words, the scout had a change of expression, as if he realized something. "Hurry up," Jushin said, frowning. The half-beast tucked his neck in, nodded, and quickly retreated. Atop the back mountain of the Rock Cave tribe. Here lay a series of abandoned mines, left from centuries ago by the dwarves. Additionally, there was a ruined ancient castle. It belonged to the old dwarf civilization, but as the veins of ore were exhausted, it gradually became history. Surrounding the ancient castle, no other plants or animals could be seen, not even a single bird, making it extremely desolate. The half-beast priest, Jushin, led a team of half-beasts pushing wheelbarrows, arriving outside the castle. All the half-beasts looked in the castle's direction with fear, and some even trembled with their legs. Seeing his tribesmen's cowardice, Jushin frowned and assured them. "Don't be afraid. Lord Merrill may look terrifying, but she is very friendly." After saying this, he painfully glanced at the wheelbarrows loaded with meat, took a deep breath, and loudly announced in the direction of the castle. "Jushin of the Rock Cave tribe, bringing meat for 100 people, pays respects to Lord Merrill." His voice, amplified by divine arts, spread far and wide. Yet moments later, there was no response. Jushin thought for a moment, then shouted again. "Lord Merrill, these meats belong to vicious and malevolent carnivorous animals. Eating them upholds justice. Furthermore, I've come to seek your assistance with confronting other hypocritical and malevolent barbaric intelligent races. Assisting them onto the path of order and civilization." This time, his voice carried even further. Gradually, the earth began to shake. Accompanied by a resonant dragon's roar, a massive shadow enveloped all the half-beasts. Confront malevolent races. An interested voice echoed above everyone. Ruaaaaaa. Lead me to them. Chapter 90. The southeastern junction of the Elf Forest and the Dark Mountain Range. An elder in a hood looked at the lush forest in the distance and breathed a slight sigh of relief. We've finally arrived. He turned back and looked at the over 200 clansmen behind him, who carried their families, bundles, and luggage, also concealing their appearances with long cloaked hoods. He smiled. We're going home. The elder was none other than Samir Wind, the Silver Lower, level 41, natural priest sent by Eve. Accompanying him were the clansmen of the Flame tribe from the Elf clan. They had been traveling through the Dark Mountain Range for over a month, and now they were finally about to emerge from the perilous foothills. Upon hearing Samir's words, the elves let out a cheer. However, Samir's expression quickly turned serious. But we cannot let our guard down. If I remember correctly, a powerful tribe of half-beastmen exists nearby. Our target of over 200 is still too large. Next, we cannot rest. We must proceed at full speed to the Elf Forest. Elves are nature's favorites. Once they entered the forest, they'd be like fish in water. Though the target of over 200 was significant, it was still more concealed and secure than being in the bare Dark Mountain Range. Philosier Flame, the clan leader of the Flame tribe beside him, also nodded. Indeed, the half-beastmen's rock cavern tribe settles nearby. They've always prided themselves on hunting elves and are considered old adversaries of our Flame tribe. Upon saying this, she almost gritted her teeth. But she was powerless. For 1,000 years, the elf clan had lost the protection of the true god and bore the shackles of a demotion curse, greatly reducing their strength. The elves not only lost all mid and high-level priests, but the birth of mages also became extremely difficult. They only mastered some instinctive zero-ring magic spells, which were not enough to match the half-beastmen backed by the divine. If there were any other path from the Dark Mountain Range to the Elf Forest, Philosier wouldn't want to take the risk. However, things were different now. The return of the Mother Goddess had been confirmed, and the shackles on the clansmen had been lifted. Although their strength was still weak, they had gained a measure of confidence. If we really encounter them, I'll sacrifice my old life to let the youngsters in the tribe return. Philosier's expression was resolute. As long as the tribe could return to the Elf Forest, she was willing to give everything, even her life. Philosier believed that under the protection of the true god, the clan would surely grow strong again. Upon hearing Philosier's words, Samir's expression became solemn. Don't worry, Philosier. I will also fully assist everyone. Not only that, but Her Excellency the Mother Goddess must also be watching over our actions. She will surely protect us. After speaking, he suddenly thought of something and turned to look at the other elves. From now on, until we reach the core area, everyone must temporarily cease daily prayers. Seeing the clansmen's puzzled expressions, Samir explained. The resurrection of the Mother Goddess remains a secret. We are currently in the phase of regrouping the clansmen and accumulating our foundation. During this period, we cannot expose the return of Her Excellency the Mother Goddess. This concerns the future of the elf clan. After Samir's explanation, the elves all nodded. Many old elves, who instinctively wanted to draw tree-shaped symbols on their chests, immediately stopped their actions. Seeing the clansmen's cooperation, Samir was very satisfied. He exchanged a glance with Philosier, nodded to each other, and gave the order. Everyone, remain silent. We move at full speed. Over 200 elves stiffened their expressions. They silently shouldered their packs and quietly quickened their pace. Along the way, Samir remained unprecedentedly vigilant. He clutched the world tree leaf bestowed by Eve in his hand, ready to activate it at any moment. However, this time, luck seemed to favor the elf clan once more. When they returned to the elf forest, there was no sign of the half-beastmen. Samir finally breathed a sigh of relief. He wiped the sweat off his forehead from the arduous journey and cast a whisper of nature on the plants of the elf forest. He was not only a priest, he was also a druid. This was a new druid skill he learned after ascending to silver under the divine favor. But as soon as he cast Whisper of Nature, his expression changed slightly. Not good. What happened? Philosier saw his expression and her heart tightened. Samir's expression was grave. Nature tells me that not long ago, a large number of half-beastmen entered the elf forest. Philosier's face changed as well. She frowned for a moment, then sighed. It's probably, our whereabouts have been exposed. The movement of over 200 was extremely conspicuous, so exposure was likely. While the elves disguised their appearance, they couldn't hide their aura or certain gestures and behaviors. They might fool others, but it would be hard to deceive half-beastmen with rich experience in hunting elves. Samir's voice was filled with gravity. The half-beastmen are immensely cunning and evil. We must be prepared for a battle. Philosier and the other elves gradually showed determination after hearing his words. They removed their hoods and drew out their elf short swords and bows. Hehe, it's been years since I used this bow. I wonder if my archery has declined. In my youth, I was an excellent elf knight until, though I'm old now, I can still wield a sword. Having made it here, there's no turning back. For the future of the elf clan and the hope of the flame tribe, let's fight if we must. Seeing the elves' resolve, Samir's expression was complex. He sighed and said, "Next, I will try to lead everyone on a detour. If we can avoid them, we will. But if it comes to combat, the elders should lead, followed by the strong youth, while everyone protects the children in the breakout." The elves listened and nodded in agreement. The elder elves were the strongest but had lost the ability to bear children. The strong youths had already taken on the legacy, but they still lacked some experience. As for the children, they were the future of the elf clan and must be protected. In an instant, the morale of the elves reached a peak. Under Samir's guidance, they entered the elf forest. But this time, it seemed the half-beastmen had long prepared for an encirclement. Samir had done his best to avoid the half-beastmen's ambush, but shortly after entering the elf forest, they still ran into scattered half-beast scouts. The half-beastmen's expressions lit up upon seeing the elves. Instead of attacking, they reached into their coats and pulled out a horn, blowing loudly. Woo! The piercing horn sound spread out like a signal. It's the half-beastmen's rallying horn. Samir's face turned pale. Half-beastmen only used this horn when deploying a large force. And a large force of half-beastmen involved at least 300, all of whom were valiant warriors. Moreover, the half-beast priests would accompany them. This was no longer a force that the weakened flame tribe could resist. Samir gritted his teeth and shouted. "Drop those heavy bags, everyone! Only take up your weapons and break through."